welcome aboard.
Put your hands together for Axios senior healthcare reporter, Tina Reed.
Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to be here. Thank you for being here for Axios inaugural Future of Health Summit. I am senior healthcare reporter Tina Reed, and along with my colleague Mike Goldman, we write the Axios Vitals newsletter. Today, we will be hosting conversations with a variety of health leaders, including award-winning journalist Katie Couric, Maryland Senator Angela Alsobrooks, GOP Doctors Caucus co-chair Congressman Greg Murphy, and many more. Today's event will dive into the latest developments that are revolutionizing healthcare, from biomedical research and AI to nutrition and consumer health. This is a really consequential moment. We are seeing our health system and institutions shift in a way we've never seen before. So to that end, we will also take an inside look at what's happening on Capitol Hill and in a new Washington, and especially looking at, so sorry. They gave me a mouthful today. So why our coverage in a new Washington matters, especially today as HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is back testifying on Capitol Hill. I do have a couple housekeeping items before we get started. There will be a short break in the programming later in the afternoon, and then a networking reception after the program where you can enjoy bites and beverages. You can scan the QR code on your badge to see a venue map, Wi-Fi information, and the full event schedule. And if you need to take a quick call, you can feel free to head up to the fourth floor lounge. Please use the hashtag Axios Future of Health when posting on socials or following along with today's conversations. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Erica Pandy.
Thank you so much, Tina. Everyone, it's so great to be here. For our first conversation today, I will welcome someone who has been a force in American media for decades. She's the co-founder of Katie Couric Media. I sort of revealed who she is right there. And she's also been a fierce advocate for cancer screenings, cancer care, and cancer research as a co-founder of Stand Up to Cancer. Please welcome to the Axios stage award-winning journalist Katie Couric.
Hi. Hi, how are you?
So Katie, you clearly don't need an introduction, but I'd like to start with a moment that maybe not everyone here is familiar with. That's when your name started showing up in scientific journals. You made history by getting a colonoscopy live on air on the Today Show, and it was referred to as a pretty little colon, I believe. And the really amazing thing that happened after that is that sociologists found that there was a 20% increase in the number of people getting colonoscopies in what they dubbed the Couric effect. For for our audience members in the room or on live stream who might not know what sparked your advocacy around colon cancer specifically, can you share that story with us?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, hi everyone. I'm so delighted to be here. It's fun to be back in Washington because I grew up in Arlington. Well, for those of you youngins out in the audience, it really was born of tragedy. I lost my husband, Jay, who was a lawyer at Williams & Conley, very proud of Williams & Conley these days, by the way. He was diagnosed with colon cancer in 1997 when he was 41 years old. And it was stage 4, and he died 9 months later. Our daughters were at the time of his death 6 and 2. It was devastating, obviously. And I think during this ordeal, I felt so powerless, Erica. And if you're a can-do person and you're dealing with something like a terminal illness, stage 4 cancer with very little possibility of a cure, it's just a terrible feeling. So, I really learned a lot during the course of Jay's illness. And that colorectal cancer is the #2 cancer killer of men and women combined, for example. And I learned all about the symptoms of colorectal cancer and all about screening. And so I was co-anchoring the Today Show at the time. And a couple of years after Jay's death, really about a year and a half, I decided it would be criminal if I didn't share what I had learned during the course of his illness, and that early detection really saves lives, and it's particularly efficacious for colorectal cancer because it has a 92% cure rate if it's detected early. So I wanted to destigmatize and demystify the whole process, and that's why I did not get it live. I'm not that brave. But I did do a colonoscopy on national television, and as a result, there was a 20% increase in colon cancer screenings, which really translates into a lot of mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and kids and uncles and aunts being alive today. So I think that colonoscopy, even though I was loopy and noted that I had a pretty little colon during the procedure, really did save a number of lives. And later, I've tried to keep, sort of being the nagging fishwife of colonoscopies and any kind of colon cancer screening. You can talk to your doctor. There are others less invasive tests. Colonoscopy is still considered the gold standard. But I took Jimmy Kimmel to get his first colonoscopy. I tried to get Kevin Hart to do one this year, but it was a hard pass, unfortunately. And I was joking at the University of Massachusetts Medical School because I gave the commencement address there, I think last year or the year before, and I said many of you probably would like me to take Tom Brady to get a colonoscopy, preferably without anesthesia, because he had just left Boston to play in Florida. But it's just something that I try to convince people and encourage them to do. And now the screening age for everyone here has been reduced to 45. So starting at age 45, you really need to get screened for colorectal cancer, and it could very much, it could possibly save your life. And if it's not you, talk to other people as well, if you're not old enough. And even if you're younger, the number of young people who are being diagnosed with colorectal cancer, I'm sure you all know, has really increased at an alarming rate. Young people today are twice as likely to be diagnosed with colon cancer and 4 times as likely to be diagnosed with rectal cancer than people who were born in 1950. They're trying to figure out why this is happening, whether it's microplastics, the overprescription of antibiotics, a whole host of reasons. I know scientists are studying this, early onset colorectal cancer. But that's why if you're younger, you really need to be acutely aware of the symptoms, which include, I'm sorry, I have to do this public service announcement, because when I have an attentive audience, which includes a change in bowel habits, blood in your stool, an unexplained weight loss, fatigue, really be aggressive, talk to your doctor, because as I said, the number of people under the age of 50 who are being diagnosed with this disease in the prime of their lives, like my husband was, has really increased. And it's very upsetting, very alarming. So I just wanted to make sure you all knew that, and please spread the word.
And please. To your point, a recent study from the American Cancer Society found that adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s are more likely than their parents to get 17 different types of cancers. And you've shown, you've advocated for all kinds of screenings. One is you had your hands on advocacy during COVID when you documented getting a mammogram on social media. That screening actually led to a diagnosis. First off, we're so happy you're healthy now.
Thank you.
Tell us what it was like to go from an advocate to a patient in a split second.
Well, sadly, I've had a lot of devastating experiences with cancer, because a couple of years after my husband Jay died, my sister Emily was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And Emily, since we're in DC with a lot of politically minded people, my sister was a real rising star in Virginia Democratic politics. She was running for lieutenant governor with Mark Warner when he was running for governor, and sadly had to drop out of the race after she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died just a couple of years later. And so I've experienced tremendous loss. But as a result, I'm very educated and knowledgeable about cancers of all kinds. And I used to call Al Rapson, who was deputy director of the NCI when Shay was sick, and I'd say, "Hey, Dr. Rapson, what's this Sanofi clinical trial they're doing with oxaliplatin? Is Jay eligible for that?" And he started answering the phone and saying, "Hi, Dr. Couric," to me. I think my understanding of the disease was really helpful when I was diagnosed with stage 1B breast cancer. And that was, I think, in 2021. And I had a lumpectomy and radiation. I had incredible care at New York Hospital, and I'm doing fine, thank goodness. I think I feel extremely lucky that I have access to extraordinarily good health care. One thing that I'm acutely aware of is the disparities among people who live in, under-resourced communities, which is really upsetting. My doctor at New York Hospital, Dr. Lisa Newman, does a lot of work in this area. And when I was going under, I said to her, "Dr. Newman, I'm so lucky. I feel so bad for people who don't have access to the kind of care I'm getting here." So I have actually been on a tear. This is what I do. I think when bad things happen to me, I talk about them and I try to spread the word.
Are you talking about the dense breast piece
yes.
of it? This is so, I wanted to say the way you put it on social media really illuminated for me. This is really stunning. 45% of women 40 and up have what are considered dense breasts. And the way you put it is for women who have them, in a mammogram, looking for abnormalities is like looking for a snowball in a snowfield.
Yes.
So we need advanced screenings for this.
Yes.
We don't have that in all cases.
That's right. That's right. So I'm one of those women, TMI, hi guys, who has dense breasts. And you're right. I think it's 42% actually of women 40 and over have what are considered dense breasts. And it's much harder to identify breast cancer in women with dense breasts. And by the way, has nothing to do with size. It just happens to do with, your particular situation. And for many of those women, there are 4 stages of dense breasts, from the least dense to the most dense. And as you said, Erica, it's like looking for a snowball against a backdrop of snow because the abnormality looks very similar to the breast density in a mammogram, even a 3D mammogram. And so I always routinely would get breast ultrasounds in addition to a mammogram when I was screened. And I was about 6 months late getting my mammogram. I think we all lost track of time during COVID. At least I did. And I went and they found obviously a small growth in my left breast. So I have been on a tear about making sure you know if you have dense breasts, and finally, I think the FDA requires notification to women after they get a mammogram that they have dense breasts and what they should do about it, that they need to talk to their doctor. The problem is a lot of insurance companies don't pay for additional or supplemental screening in the form of an MRI or a breast ultrasound. So again, that health disparity really exists when it comes to early detection of breast cancer, which just isn't right. So along with Rosa DeLauro, I've been working on some legislation called the Find It Early Act, which will require insurers to cover additional supplemental screening for women with dense breasts, so their breast cancer can be detected early.
In 2008, you co-founded Stand Up to Cancer, which is committed to raising money for cancer research. In these first 4 months of the Trump administration, we've seen sweeping, unprecedented cuts and funding freezes and just general uncertainty around funding and the future of certain projects at universities, including those related to cancer research. What is the role of Stand Up to Cancer and organizations like it in this moment?
Well, I have to say it's been absolutely terrible and chilling what has happened to scientific research under the Trump administration. It's really actually unfathomable and unbelievable what they're doing in terms of slowing down the pace of medical and scientific research. We're talking about over $1 billion in funds cut from the NIH, which gives the majority of their money to the top research institutions in the country. We're talking about thousands of people losing their jobs. We're talking about PhD programs stalling or being, or getting rid of them altogether. We're talking about clinical trials. I met with somebody who runs something called the Colorectal Cancer Alliance on Friday in New York, and he was telling me about a young woman who has stage 4 metastatic colon cancer, was on a clinical trial at NIH to be treated with immunotherapy, a new immunotherapy that I think was treating a particular gene mutation. And she was notified that the clinical trial was being put on hold because of staffing cuts, because it was going to take twice as long to process her T cells. And that, you think about someone, and I know very well and very personally what it's like to have metastatic colon cancer or any advanced disease, being told that you're going to have to wait to get your treatment. And this is happening to people all over the country and all over the world. And Stand Up to Cancer obviously is affected. I'll just give you guys a little bit of background on Stand Up to Cancer. You notice how fast I'm talking because we don't have that much time up here. We started Stand Up to Cancer in 2008, 9 women who were really frustrated with the pace of cancer research. And we thought that there was too much competition, too much proprietary work being done, and people weren't sharing their research enough. And I learned this as I tried to come up with things that Jay could do when he had cancer. And so we decided that cancer research could move forward faster if there was more collaboration and less competition. So we've raised nearly $800 million to support dream teams of scientists who are from all different research institutions like Johns Hopkins or Harvard or MD Anderson or the Hutch, along with biomedical firms, along with other scientists. And they work together to try to solve some of these intractable problems. Initially, they were very like, wait, I'm not gonna work with this other institution. Now they take vacation together. So, it's really been valuable. Our research has contributed to 9 FDA-approved cancer-fighting drugs since we started, and we need these clinical trials to obviously get these drugs into the pipeline. And by the way, if you want some perspective on how important the NIH is to cancer research, from 2010 to 2019, 254 of the 256 new therapeutics approved by the FDA were all the result of at least partial research by the NIH. So I think that encapsulates how devastating these cuts are, and how, I agree with Tammy Baldwin, who said recently, we all want government to be more efficient, but curing Alzheimer's disease or cancer has nothing to do with waste, fraud, and abuse.
I wish we had more time. I have one final question for you. You have been the example of putting on your journalist hat when tragedy struck and being like, how can I research this, report this? What is the future? What is your future in how media can continue to affect change in public health? Whether that's what you think the media at large can do, what you think Katie Couric Media can do. What's next?
Well, we started this company, Katie Couric Media. I didn't want to call it that, but everyone said we might as well, because at that time it was much easier to become a household name before there were a bazillion media outlets. And our goal is to get fact-based information to consumers, to lead better lives, to become better citizens, and to live longer, quite frankly. And I think at this time of huge amount of medical and scientific disinformation, not to mention just a lack of trust and faith in our scientific community, which I think is deplorable, quite frankly, I want to make sure that I'm getting the most up-to-date and the most valid and verified scientific information. We do it through our newsletter called Wake Up Call. We have a newsletter called Body and Soul, which deals with a lot of health and wellness. We have over 1 million subscribers to our newsletter. We have close to 10 million people on social media following our work. And I think now more than ever, it's absolutely critically important to rely on real experts who know what they're doing, who have the scientific experience and educational background to give the best, most up-to-date scientific information and medical information to consumers that they can totally trust and rely on.
That is all the time we have. I wish we had more. Thank you so much,
Thank
Katie.
you.
Thanks for being with us here in DC.
Thank
and we
you.
look forward to seeing who you take to get a colonoscopy next.
Thank you. Thanks.
Welcoming back, Tina Reed.
Hello again, everyone. Next up, I'm going to chat with someone who is transforming the health insurance space, specifically how the individual market is poised to address some of the critical issues plaguing the employer-sponsored model. Please give a warm welcome to Oscar Health CEO, Mark Bertolini. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here with you, Tina.
I wanted to start with more of a personal story because I think that it really shapes who you are as a healthcare executive. When you first joined Aetna, you actually had a pretty serious accident. Can you talk about that and how that has sort of shaped how you view leading a healthcare organization?
I was skiing. I had just jumped off a rock and into the woods and was skiing through to my house. And I caught an edge and I hit a tree and I broke my neck in 5 places. C2, C3, C5, C6, T1. I slid head first down into a ravine and laid in a river for 2 hours before they found me. And that saved my life. The cold water in the river froze my spinal cord and prevented it from rupturing. And so I'm what's called a super quad. I'm a walking quadriplegic. I have a quadriplegic injury that didn't cause more damage. And for the next 18 years after I got out of so when I woke up in the hospital, I was in a coma for 7 days. They had me on an EEG machine. They were waiting for me to flatline. And the nurse was giving me a sponge bath. I said, "What are you doing?" And she went running from the room going, "Oh my God, he's alive." And which was really comforting, by the way. It wasn't a dream. And they said, "What do you need to know?" I said, "How do I get out of here? Because if I stay in the hospital too long, you'll kill me." And I'd worked in hospitals. I'd been a paramedic in Detroit during the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. I'd run the emergency room of receiving hospital for 4 years. So I knew what hospitals were like. And they're really well-intended institutions, but it's really hard. And what I found in leaving the hospital early is that I was on my own. I was physically, structurally patent. I could still move around, but I had a whole life to try to recapture. And ended up in chronic pain for 18 years. Slept an hour a night, level 7 to 10 pain. Right side of my brain shut down. And I was about to end my life in Zurich, Switzerland in February of 23 at Dignitas through assisted suicide. And I had to meet with doctors about intractable pain. And the doctors all looked at me and said, "You don't have intractable pain. We're sorry, you have neuroplastic pain and we can fix you." And 6 months later, I was out of pain. So but here's the problem. Every time I went to see a doctor, I got a prescription for drugs, narcotics. When I cleaned out my safe after my pain was gone, which I didn't use, I was afraid to use them. When I cleaned out my safe and took it to the police station, the police helped me count up $450,000 worth of street value and how I could have put my neighborhood through school had I put it to better use. But the system was about a break-fix operation. It was not about somebody's life. And we did a lot of research at Aetna, we've done a lot of research at Oscar, and what we have found about people is they never describe themselves as an injury or a disease. I never describe myself as a spinal cord injury survivor. I describe myself as the limitations I have as a result of the injury I have. I was classically trained in piano. I can't play piano anymore, at least to my satisfaction. My fly fishing is horrible, and my golf handicap went from 12 to 21. I can still ride my motorcycles, and I can still ride my road bikes, but getting my life back was the first thing I wanted to do, and there was no one there to counsel me to say, "You can't get it back, you have to find your new life. You have to reinvent yourself. You have to find yourself in a new place. And the treatment I took was simply transcranial magnetic stimulation, disconnecting the pain centers in my brain, and virtual reality with psilocybins. No medicine, no special I had 9 major surgeries. And so what I said about the system is we're not looking at the human being as someone who has a life to live and has an impediment to that life that they're unable to overcome. So if you're talking to a diabetic with pedal neuropathy and you say, what is it about your feet that gets in the way of the life you want to lead? They'll say, I used to go for a walk in the park with my kids, my grandchildren, or I used to walk to the senior center to play cards and I can't do that anymore. If you can say to them, hey, if we get your diabetes under control, you can do that again, you now have them engaged. Because it's about them, it's about the life that they want to lead. It's not the picture of men or women's fitness magazine saying, here's a perfect human. Not many of us in the room can qualify, no matter how hard we try. And so this idea of finding people where they are and what health does to create barriers for their life is really what we're trying to do at Oscar. We have benefit plans for diabetics. We want diabetics to join us. Because if they engage with us in the way we can, they can get better. And they become cheaper to take care of. So the idea is to better understand personalized medicine, not population health, not a disease-specific injury. It's about how do I help these people live the life they want to lead in a way that suits the life they want to lead.
Well, can you talk about a little bit more about what that looks like for what you pay for as a payer, and how does that differ perhaps from what we see from traditional legacy players?
One of the things we found in people coming back from war in the Middle East, soldiers, they would have an ankle injury and they would have their ankle fused from an IED, and they would eventually come around to the fact that they can't run, and they want to run. So take my leg below the knee and give me a spring so I can run. I had the debate with my doctor about my left arm. Take the arm off and give me the bionic arm and maybe I can play piano again. But this ain't working. And their view of the medical system is this is a perfectly good biological arm. It still functions to their satisfaction, not to mine. And so this idea of finding people where they are and what they can do, I had one orthopedic surgeon who had to replace part of my humerus from my accident, and I told him I was an inch short on the left side of my brake calipers on my road bike. And so he gave me an inch bone graft longer so I could reach my calipers on my road bike. That's where medicine's headed. How can you help me live my life? And so the opportunity to do that creates a better individual who has a healthier outlook on life, and they're not stuck at home staring at the TV or wondering how long the pain's going to exist and how long their life's going to last.
I want to talk a little bit more about how Oscar Health is a little bit different, because you still have very much those startup vibes compared to some of these larger companies. Can you talk about what market do you really serve?
So we serve the ACA market. We take care of individuals who otherwise could not afford their own health insurance. We cover just short of 2 million people. We have a net promoter score of 67. That means that the people that like us are at 83 and the people that hate us are at 17. And that in an insurance industry where the average net promoter score is 0 is quite an advantage. And so we play to that advantage in everything we do. If we invest in some part of the business, and we have a digital platform that allows people to interact with us relatively on their own, digitally if they'd like, and in an operation like that, we always now look at every investment we make, and it says if it doesn't improve the member's experience with us, we don't do it. Now, that got the company in trouble a little bit in the beginning because they didn't pay attention to certain regulations that are required in order to run an insurance company, and we fixed those, Sarbanes-Oxley and material compliance with laws. But once we got those fixed, the team realized that we could create, a really powerful platform. And so our intention with the platform over time is to extend it to health systems and put them in the business of taking care of people at risk instead of having insurance companies do it. Our moniker or our meme at the business is Mark Bertolini standing at the helm of a pirate ship among Spanish galleons filled with gold. All we have to do is provide a better product and people will come with us versus staying with them. And so it's all about this delight that people can have by working with us as a carrier.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the ACA market, since obviously that's such a focus for you. Right now, there's a lot of question marks about what's going to happen in the future, for instance, with enhanced subsidies, et cetera. We're seeing large players like Aetna leave the market. I guess what's the future of the ACA market in your mind?
I think it's the market for all Americans in the next decade. And here's the reason why. When I was in graduate school in the 80s, a long time ago, the definition of a well-run health system was a health system that had trend, changes in cost every year, that was less than the CPI. That is what the ACA has done for the last 4 years. Our trend has been less than the CPI. It's averaged 3.5%. So we have a model that now works. In the ACA, we spread risk across all the plans, and at the end of the year, we swap it out, and we pay the people who didn't make enough, and those of us that made too much have to give into the pool. So it socializes the risk across all of the marketplaces so that nobody's a big winner and nobody's a big loser, and there's no reason to cheat the system. So now smaller employers and middle market employers are seeing double-digit rate increases. We can put them in what is called ICHRA, individual consumer health reimbursement accounts, let them buy their product on the ACA and keep it. And why does that matter? Well, most employers buy big, large networks to support all their employees. Big networks cost more money because there's no way to route market share. In the ACA, 75% of all providers are in the ACA market. So we all have narrow networks because we get better rates. So if you're an individual buyer, not an employer, you can find your network. If you're a diabetic, you can find your product. And so if you can buy your own product and your own network with your own hospital and you can keep it, why wouldn't that be a better buying experience than having your employer tell you what you get and having to pay a % of premium? If you're a healthy person, you're paying far more than you're getting because you're covering the sick people in the group. So this idea of letting people have employers give the money that they are otherwise use for health insurance, give it to the employees and let them buy it, is called defined contribution. We did it with pensions 20, 30 years ago. Now the time has come to do it with health insurance now that we have a fully developed, the largest risk pool in America, the ACA market, and now turn it into an individual market for everyone. We can do it for gig workers, where they can create hour banks and just put away so much and then go out and buy their health insurance from the individual market. So the total individual market has an opportunity to hold 125 million lives, which would make the risk pool even more stable and less costs. So the time's coming. So there is legislation introduced in the current bill on making ICHRAs move forward, helping ICHRAs move forward. And this is sort of the potential size of the market. The chart before was the relative rate of increase on trend versus employer market and CPI. So we really think we have a product here that's the future, where Americans can buy what they want, have the network they want, and keep the product they want over time and have a much more stable experience and not have to change your insurance every time you change your employment or you go to a different part of your life.
Now, I know you've been lobbying lawmakers on this. You've spoken with the Trump administration. What's the receptivity been?
So this is the crazy part. Just imagine when the ACA was started, the Democrats wanted to get every American into an individual market. That was the initial intent. run the insurance companies out of business, have everybody buy from the individual market. The Republicans like ICRA because it gives freedom of choice, an opportunity to shop, and to spend your money where you want to spend it. Last year, 40% of all Americans borrowed $74.9 billion to pay their medical bills. If you have money left over from your defined contribution based on the plan you buy, you can pay for that out of your pocket and cover it at pre-tax dollars. So this idea of creating this stable and larger market for people to shop in, not have to put their personal finances at risk and borrow money to make payments is an idea that's been a long time coming.
And just continuing on the policy theme, what have your impressions been so far of interacting with this administration? I know there's a lot of questions with the transition into the new administration about how do you change your messaging? What are their priorities versus how do you get across your priorities?
You don't use certain words, like DEI, bad word. You change the nomenclature that you use, same product. Right? I sit on the Verizon board, I chair their finance committee. Our DEI effort is alive and well. It's just not called that anymore. They're not employee resource groups, they're business resource groups. It's a way to keep going and keep doing what we believe in as an organization is important to the product we deliver to the marketplace. So that's one sort of thing. You have to be careful about the words you use. You have to wear a tie every time you go in. So I had a tie on early. I was at CMS this morning with Mehmet Oz, and Dr. Oz and I chatted about the individual market, and so you wear a tie. Because that's this administration's thing, right? It's not as relaxed. You help them understand the business rationale behind it. Now, it's really early, and so everybody's sort of figuring out where the bathroom is still. So we have some time to go, but this is the time to now plant seeds about what you could do to change the market. But if the Republicans like a open, free market where people can buy what they want and keep what they want, and the Democrats always thought that an individual market was the best market for all Americans, why not give them both the story and say, here's one you can take off the table you don't have to fight over anymore, which has been one of the most fought over issues in political history in this country, how to take care of people in need. Our uninsured rate has gone from 19% to 8%, just under 8%, since the ACA was put in place. And then finally, I would say this. A lot of people, so our planet, and I'm one of the world 50 CEOs that talks to CEOs all around the world. I talk to at least two of them a week. And they always say, what do you do in this environment? The last thing you do is fight, flight, or freeze. Anxiety is endemic in the world. Don't let them drive your anxiety, because then you stop paying attention and things happen that you otherwise could have said something about. Be clear-headed about what matters, not everything that happens. I stopped watching the news in the morning because it's just crazy. I don't open the Yahoo cover page anymore because it's just nuts.
You still read Axios though, right? You still read Axios though, right?
No, I don't react. It's like I do my yoga, I do my meditation, Zen, because it's crazy. Otherwise you get so tied up inside, you're falling into the trap of not being able to react when it's important. So, a lot of what's going on now is passing. It'll be passing over some time. Don't jump into it. Don't get sucked into it and react. A lot of it's just not that important, right? I mean, who cares what jet he flies around in?
Well, Mark, thank you so much. You've come up on time, but it's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Up next, our View from the Top moderator, Axios publisher, Nicholas Johnston.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the publisher of Axios, Nicholas Johnson. Thanks so much for being here. This is our very first Future of Health Summit. Very exciting day for us. Of course, it wouldn't be possible without all of you joining us here today, so we're very grateful for that. We're also grateful for all of our partners at Axios. Nothing we do would be possible without the support of our partners. The investments we make in journalism around the country, convening great conversations like this. So a huge thanks to one of our partners today, Adtalem Global Education, and I'm very excited to welcome to the stage for a view from the top conversation, Adtalem's Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Steve Beard. Steve, welcome to the Axios stage. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
Let's start big picture to talk about health care. There's so many conversations about constant staffing crises, policy changes, big conversations on the Hill even this week about this, the changing needs of the population ages. Take a step back and tell us how Adtalem and you navigate all these challenges.
Lots of things going on in that backdrop that you just described, but it's a great time to be in the business that we're in. So we're the largest healthcare educator in the United States, about 94,000 students in aggregate, the number one producer of physicians, nurses, social workers, and veterinarians in the United States. And at a time where the system is struggling with chronic workforce shortages that are growing, we're in the privileged position of being able to provide an outsized number of clinicians to U.S. healthcare every single year. So we want to double down on that. We want to do more to address some of those dynamics you've articulated, and it's a fantastic time to be in our business.
Well, so let's dig in a little bit on the staffing side of it. How have you achieved those goals of providing so many different kinds of clinicians? Like, what fits into the magic there?
Yeah, so we are a higher education organization, but we take a somewhat different approach to higher education. Much of U.S. higher ed has really chased a value proposition rooted in high selectivity, historical prestige. We have an access mission. We want to expand the opportunity for folks who want to be clinicians, and we take a holistic approach to building classes that are broadly representative of the communities those clinicians are ultimately going to serve.
I'm going to come back to that equity thing in a minute, but we wouldn't be able to talk future of healthcare without like getting into AI and like real cutting edge technology. How does that fit in both to like the delivery of your service and then how you educate those students?
Yeah, so we think artificial intelligence, generative AI, is a game changer for education in a very positive way. We're leveraging it across a host of use cases. We've got AI tutors, we've got AI agents serving in student support capacities. It gives us additional flexibility to meet our students where they are. If they want help in the middle of the night or on weekends, we've got the ability to answer questions to help them as they master material. We think it's a great way to enhance the student journey in ways that produces more student success.
Yeah. Is there a flip side of that too? Not just using AI to teach the students, but teaching the students to use AI in the delivery of care? Like, what's the cutting edge of that? Right?
Yeah, so we've got a partnership with Hippocratic AI, which is a unicorn startup in the Valley that's developing a whole suite of AI tools that are really focused on sort of the high-value, non-diagnostic activities that clinicians perform in the care environment. We're developing a curricula for nurses and physicians to be able to better utilize those tools, and we're testing that curricula with our own students. And so what that means is, across our nursing programs, 45,000 nursing students, we're able to give them exposure to these tools in a way that makes it much easier for them to leverage them in the care environment for patients. So we're very excited about that partnership.
What do you view in the future as like, what does that leveraging look like? And is there a place where AI comes together with increased staffing to begin to really address or maybe solve some of these staffing issues to make clinicians more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, there's some folks that believe that the technology will ultimately become a substitute for clinicians. I'm not sure I buy that, but
I'm not sure I am either.
Yeah,
I like my doctor.
But I do think it's an opportunity to really extend the impact of clinicians in an exponential way, particularly at points of scarcity. The ability to monitor patients, to help them through drug regimens and folks with chronic diseases who need attention in between visits with physicians. It's a fantastic leverage point that I think will go a long way towards broadening the reach of healthcare and making individual human clinicians that much more effective.
There was something you said earlier, the way you approach educating people, like not on the basis of prestige. You're not like managing your yields to make it hard for people to get in.
That's
your
right.
goal is to educate as many people as you can to do that, to increase access. Tell us how that fits into goals rules on equity across the industry. That's a huge concern across care.
Yeah, I think one of the central pillars of the research around health inequities that isn't in dispute is that people receive more compassionate and competent care when they have a relationship of trust with their provider. And oftentimes, having an affinity with the patient goes a long way. A concurrence of language helps with folks that are not English proficient. If you come from a similar background as the patient, they're more likely to share more with you. And to the extent that we can provide a more diverse, more representative clinical workforce, they're likely to give better and more effective care to patients in ways that chip away at these disparities.
How do you, do you track that? I mean, are you able to see specifically like what the outcomes are, or what the kind of patient care you're able to get?
Yeah, like I think the research on this is clear, and in our curricula across our nursing and medical programs, we have baked health equity into the way we train our physicians. We are preparing them for environments where they're going to see people for whom English isn't the first language they speak, or who come from difficult environments where transportation, food scarcity, and other issues make care delivery difficult. And so we want to send day-ready, compassionate clinicians into the workforce across the United States.
So before we run out of time, let's spin this forward. We're at a Future of Healthcare Summit. Like, look over the horizon. Like, what is coming next for you? What are you excited about? How's technology changing?
Yeah, so I think the AI innovations are going to greatly increase our ability to drive student success across our programs. I think as we continue to grow, we're going to be able to provide an increasingly large number of clinicians. We're already the #1 provider of nurses in the country, the #1 producer of Black physicians in the country. The ability to expand that reach and that access to folks who want to go back to practice in urban and rural communities is going to be a big part of the way we contribute to the greater good of U.S. healthcare. And I think these AI technologies are going to go a long way towards addressing burnout and bringing up the quality of care and making it somewhat less scarce for all of us.
I mean, it seems like AI and technology could solve both of those things, both clinician efficiency, so you'd have more of them, and then efficiency on the burnout issue.
Exactly.
It seems like a thing that comes up all the time.
Relieving some of these incredible administrative burdens that clinicians are facing, allowing them to spend more time in the high-value work of actually being at the bedside caring for patients.
The long-term goal, more clinicians spending more time with patients.
More clinicians, more representative clinicians, spending more time with patients.
So before we get the hook here at Axios, I'd like to end on one fun thing. It is graduation season around the country. It's coming up for you. How many graduations do you have coming? How many people are you sending out into the world? And what's your favorite part?
Yeah, we've got 7 graduations coming up this season. Thousands of students crossing the stage. It's one of my favorite things to do, to go to graduations. I don't sit up front on the dais with the administrators and the faculty. I like to sit out in the audience with the families. You're talking multi-generation families, immigrant families, veteran families, lots of languages being spoken, and you really do get a sense for how important that day is, not just for the graduate, but for the extended community they come from.
Big transformative moments, graduation day.
Oh, big
Absolutely.
deal. Very big deal.
That's great. Thanks so much for being here. Huge thanks to Adtalem for making today possible. Stick around, the conversation continues.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Introducing Axios managing editor, Allison Snyder.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Snyder. I'm one of the managing editors here at Axios. I'm really excited to have our next guest, Dr. Anthony Sandler. He's the surgeon-in-chief, at Children's National Hospital here in DC. We're going to chat for a few minutes, then we're going to do a demo, which is why we have this unusual setup here. So we're going to be moving a little bit. Just roll with us, please. And with that, please help me in welcoming Dr. Sandler to the stage. All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to chat for a few minutes, and I wanted to start by asking you, we read a lot about this from a scientific standpoint being a golden age in medicine, right? There's RNA vaccines, there's gene editing, there's weight loss drugs, immunotherapy, so many different things. But you're working with a very special population. And so to start, can you just give us a sense of how these things are actually changing pediatric care in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you for having me, Allison. It's a pleasure to be here and to represent Children's National. The healthcare is moving very fast. And what often happens in adults also happens in children. Unfortunately, most of the research is directed initially at adults and then kind of whittles down to children. At Children's Hospital, we're trying to turn that around. We're trying to do research for children that will then whittle its way up to adults. We're turning it on its head. As you said, it's an incredible time in research. It's incredibly exciting. The breakthroughs that are happening continuously are amazing. And I have two daughters who are starting their medical careers. And I'm a little envious because I'm towards the end of my career. And I think the next 15 to 30 years will really change the way we deliver healthcare.
And your specialty, you're a pediatric surgeon. How about, I think, again, we see stories or we write stories about, robotic surgeons, things like that. How is your particular field changing?
So there's two ways to look at it. I'm going to speak specifically to Children's National. About 15 years ago, we were given a gift from United Arab Emirates to create an Institute of Pediatric Surgical Innovation. And our goal for that was to do things less invasively, more precisely, and pain-free. That was kind of the mantra that we started with. And it's really expanded incredibly well. We really are changing the way we do healthcare in children, especially surgery. We're miniaturizing the devices we use. You spoke about devices and innovation. And so much of that is becoming part of our regular practice that we're doing all the time now. For my own interest in research, I do a lot of cellular therapy. That's sort of one aspect. And I think that's going to change a lot of the future. There's limitations of a surgical abilities. When cells are floating around the body, you have to target them with other means. And I think immunotherapy and cell therapy and training immune cells to actually target and kill cancer cells is the future. We have artificial intelligence that's permeating its way throughout healthcare on all levels. The last speaker was speaking about it. It's going to change the way we deliver care. It's going to make, hopefully it's going to allow us to spend more time with patients and less time with administrative tasks. We're also working with devices at our institute. And we're doing some incredible work with devices. We're looking at a nociceptor, a device that can actually measure pain. We're doing work with robots that potentially can autonomously do surgery. So you're cutting the surgeon out completely almost. That's two of the projects that we're working on in the Institute. And then there's all kinds of other devices where you can enhance the imaging and the capabilities of what the surgeon can see in the operating room with fluorescence technology, laser spec, multi-spec, and also depolarizing imaging that can enhance the view, that can help the surgeon see what they cannot see.
It was not your job to set up the demo, but you just did a very good job of it, so thank you. I want to go ahead and call your colleague, Dr. Shekhar, out. We're going to get set up with this demo, and we're going to We're going to move
Okay.
a little bit. All right.
We would love to bring our big robots in here, but you can't do that. So I think this is a really nice demo to show.
So can you start off by telling us a little bit about, just while he's getting set up, what the problem is that you're trying to solve here with this device, and what the challenge is and what we're sort of you're trying to tackle?
So Dr. Shekhar's
Sorry, I'm going
group.
to ask you to speak.
Okay.
Sorry, you're more important than me here.
Does
Okay.
augmented reality? No, that's not true. Does augmented reality, and this device itself is sort of allowing an image. So he's using ultrasound here. And we do a lot of procedures with ultrasound guidance, like more precise. It was one of the goals. And what this actually does is you don't get the view that he's actually seeing.
I think we will in a second.
Okay. The ultrasound shows you your target. Normally when you're doing a procedure on a patient using ultrasound, you're looking at a big screen on the ultrasound machine. And it's usually a big machine that's pulled in. And you have to work like this and look like this, so the ergonomics don't work. The idea of this ultrasound is it's in line of sight. So you're actually looking at the patient, you're targeting either a biopsy, a blood vessel, or whatever you want to put a catheter in somewhere, and you use the ultrasound to actually identify the site, and then you can put it in straightforward in a very ergonomic way. It also allows autonomy. What he's doing there, unfortunately, you're not seeing the picture, but what he's doing there is actually controlling the size of the image, the gain of the image, and you're not seeing it. But what's happening is the ultrasound is going up, it's going down. He doesn't have to take gloves off and go work on the machine. He can do it all from the side of the bed while he's sterile.
Can you give a sense of, I guess, outcomes that you can share with us about, with the technology? There you go. Whoop.
Edit mode.
All right. So
Scale down. Scale down.
He's giving voice command. Thank you.
Move down. Move down. Center image.
So the augmented reality, he sees the picture in front of him, he sees what's going on around him, and then he also gets the ultrasound image in the screen.
Pen mode.
And that allows him to do access directly.
And so, just revisiting my other question, what are some of the outcomes that you see from this? And from both, I guess, maybe the patient perspective and from the physician's perspective, how much easier does it make your job?
So I have a saying in surgery, a lot of my fellows and residents will tell you that if it's easy on the surgeon, it's easy on the patient. In other words, if the surgeon's struggling, it's more difficult for the patient. There's more risk of complication. There's more risk of doing the wrong thing. So this is really facilitating the ease of the procedure, which I think will obviously translate to a benefit of the patient.
Got it. What are some of the pain points with something like this? Not aside from demoing it on a stage. What are some of the pain points in terms of rolling this technology out and using it in the clinic?
I think physicians are used to doing something one way. Oh, I can do it. I don't need that.
Yeah.
And I think it's just getting the practice to change to accept the new technologies. I think that's always somewhat of a limitation, but I think these new technologies are going to change the way we do care.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Shekhar. Thanks for bearing with us. I like it, appreciate it. All right, we're going to take another seat here quick. So I guess one of my other questions is, what are some of the, risks and limitations of relying on tools like this?
Well, there'll always be risks. Because technology can break down, and people become more dependent on it. And let's say you have an autonomous surgery by a robot that's going to remove the gallbladder, and it's become sort of part of the routine. And then the surgeon who's overseeing it, the robot breaks down, the surgeon may not be as well trained to do the operation themselves. So there will be risks, there'll be valid risks, but you can't stop the technology. I mean, if we look at the capabilities of the last 30 years where we've had CTs, MRIs, PET scans, I mean, it's become part of the practice. And I think we'll adopt it, we'll learn to adopt it, and we'll have strategies to prevent breakdowns and complications.
You mentioned earlier on you have two daughters who are they going into medicine?
One's third year of orthopedic surgery, and one's in the third year of medical school.
And you mentioned being envious of them. So I'm curious, can you say a little bit about more why that is, and I guess sort of take us forward 10 years, what technology you think will actually sort of completely change your field, or maybe their fields for that matter?
Well, artificial intelligence, and the last speaker was alluding to it. We've gone through a bit of a difficult time where all the documentation we have to do for billing has really been cumbersome and difficult for physicians. Now there's some technology where you go into the patient's room, it listens to your conversation, it writes a note for you, you check the note and you sign it. I'm envious I think they're going to get back to taking care of patients. I think the technology that they're going to have is going to be extraordinary, and it's going to really facilitate the care. And I think what I alluded to earlier with things like immune cells and cellular therapies, I think it's going to change the face of healthcare.
I want to ask you, because I actually have a little bit of time. For a long time, there was sort of a promise of personalized medicine, right? And with the advances in imaging, as well as genetic data, AI, again, thinking about the younger patients, is that going to become a reality? Do you think more personalized medicine?
The personal bias, I think it will. Mm-hmm. I think we'll get smarter about how to... one of the holdups with that, however, will be the business aspect of healthcare. If it becomes personalized, there's not a big business model where you grab something off the shelf and then develop it. And I think business is important to developing products. But I do think that there will be a lot of personalized care.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Shekhar and your team for coming and joining us. And everyone in the audience, please grab a refreshment, make a phone call, and be back here in about 15 minutes for our second half of programming. There will be conversations with Senator Tammy Baldwin, HER's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jessica Shepard, and more. So we'll see you back here in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please grab a seat. The show will begin momentarily. Welcoming back, Nicholas Johnston.
Hello, folks. It's me again. Thanks for sticking around. We're into the afternoon of our program. We've got a lot to come. Remember, you can scan the QR codes on the back of your ID badges to learn more about what is coming up. As I mentioned earlier, we couldn't do anything without the support of our partners, and I'm very excited for this next partner, Danone, who, when they join us, also brings cool things to eat and drink. So hopefully you got to taste some of those things during the break. And so I'm very excited to welcome back to the Axios stage Danone's Group Deputy CEO, Shane Grant. Shane, great to see you again. Come on up. How are you? Welcome back. Let's start big picture. Like, just what is the state of play in nutrition in America right now?
Good afternoon, Nick. Thanks for having us. Really excited to be here. Firstly, I think what what I would say about the state of health and nutrition is it's on the rise in America. And what I mean by that is, when we look at the data, the prominence of health and nutrition and its importance to Americans is on the rise across all demographics. To the extent that we see, for example, Americans consider food and health through food to be more important to their health than sleep and exercise. So it's huge on the agenda of Americans. Clearly, I think at the moment it is elevated by what has become a cultural and political discussion in this country. And, we had the privilege of being with HHS and the FDA just this morning and other members of the administration and having some really productive discussions about health and the future of food. And so we feel that partnership in terms of helping create the future. I think thirdly, what I would say, Nick, is for the food industry, we think this is just an incredible opportunity.
Right.
Incredible opportunity. I mean, we, in terms of our company, our mission is pretty straightforward, which is health through food to as many people as possible. And we're a company that's got deep roots in the United States, from pretty humble beginnings in the Bronx in New York in 1942 to the biggest yogurt business in the US, the biggest plant-based business in the US, and other businesses that, we're proud to represent in this country. And we're deeply invested in food in the US. I mean, we've invested $5 billion in infrastructure in this country over the last decade. We use 2 billion pounds of milk every year, and that's growing. So we're here to invest and grow that because, frankly, the market's growing. So I think it's both a period of responsibility, but an incredibly exciting period in food in the US.
So you mentioned something about personal interest and human interest, and how people are trying to take action on that. We wouldn't have to one of the hottest trends right now is protein. Give us your vantage point of why is that, and how can food companies adjust?
I think, Nick, we think about the rise of or the prominence of health. I think arguably protein is the hottest manifestation of that today. It's somehow all around us, the value of protein. To the extent that we see 3/4 of Americans is telling us they want more protein in their diet.
Yep.
We look at what's happening in terms of search and the curiosity of American consumers, and there's a huge amount of research being done out there about protein, but interestingly, quality of protein and the composition of protein, what we call complete protein. And so, consumers are getting more interested and becoming more sophisticated. We've said, there's a lot of food companies out there talking about protein at the moment, and we've said, in fact, a number of years ago, that we want to lead and shape protein because we obviously see the connection to our business and what an exciting space it is. We have a brand in the United States called Oikos, which is a brand that stands for protein. And that's a business which is now $1 billion platform for us in the US, growing double digit, allowing us to win market share in Greek yogurt. So it's a really exciting space for us. We have added to that portfolio this week in a platform that we're really excited about, which is an entrance into protein shakes.
Yep.
And for us, that's a big deal because it is moving Oikos for the first time out of the refrigerator into the aisle. And for us, that's obviously a big deal. It provides more shoppability for consumers, more convenience. But importantly for us, when we go into that space, it's clearly a big segment, $7 billion segment, growing. But we want to do it in a way which we call better, special, different. And that product is 30 grams of protein, 5 grams of prebiotic fiber, 1 gram of sugar, and no artificial sweeteners. And importantly, no artificial colors and dyes. So it's a really exciting platform for us, and we think it's a way for American consumers, we hope, to sort of up their shake game.
Well, we don't have to talk about it here, do we? I think we've got...
We could.
All right, this is a live...
Somewhere here.
This is a live test.
This is an important moment.
What flavor did you get? I got vanilla, okay.
I also have vanilla.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, that's pretty good.
I'm so glad you think that.
No, I do. I'm not just saying that, although I would, even if it was. But no. These were go around back here so everyone can test us for themselves. Thank you. I knew you'd always bring something good.
Of course.
Each time. Let's spin this forward a little bit, though. We talked about equity last time I was up here on stage, and like on issues of nutrition, it just can't be for the wealthy, for people who can afford these kinds of things. How do you approach that as far as bringing these kinds of nutritional advancements like to the broadest part?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question. I mean, for us, Nick, I would go back to mission. And the mission is health through food, and importantly, to as many people as possible, which obviously fundamentally is about access. And when we think about that, we think about it in what I hope is simple but not simplistic dimensions. You know, we think about it through the lens of where we sell. You know, we have a portfolio we're really proud of in terms of what we think is one of the healthiest portfolios in food. 70% of it nutrient dense or healthy. To be able to scale that and make it available to as many people as possible, it means more access, and that means more access through our retail partners. Obviously, that's fantastic for our business, but it's obviously how we serve the mission. We think about it through a second dimension of how we sell. And by that, access is a lot about packages and price points and on-ramps onto good food. And so we think very seriously, both commercially but as part of the mission, about how we provide a range of options to be able to enter yogurt or enter water or enter plant-based, because that really, really matters. And then thirdly, you know, we're thinking about, of course, what we sell. And, you know, for us, that's a mission of innovation and constant improvement. So obviously we've talked about one of those today, which we're proud of, and I'm really proud of the team in terms of the innovation that they're bringing to the market. But we also think about constantly improving the core of what we sell. So for example, we've committed by the end of this year to, particularly against the products that are for children, for our dairy and plant-based business, with concrete targets of sugar reduction. And so 95% of our portfolio with 10 grams of sugar per 100 grams of product. And that's a journey for us, but it's a journey we take really, really seriously. We announced 2 weeks ago that, and we were really proud to do this, that we would remove all artificial colors and dyes from our products. And we would work with our suppliers to make that happen. Now, granted, that's a very small part of our portfolio, so it's about 2% of our portfolio that has those ingredients, but we've committed to remove them. And already today, none of those products are in schools. So we're really serious about access, see to as many people as possible, and we're really serious about a constant improvement journey on that mission.
Before we run out of time, I want to stay on innovation, and instead of ending on one fun thing, I went in on one future thing. Every time I see you, I ask you, come on, what's in the labs, what's next?
And I find a way to not answer you, and then we
question, we're going to ask it again. Like, tell us something cool that's in the secret labs about the future of food.
Yes. Maybe let me take it in two chunks. Firstly, we strongly believe that food's at a tipping point in this country. And there's a list of big macro moves that are happening in food. Think about gut health and its connection to wellness. Think about flexitarian at scale. Think about low and no sugar. Think about protein that we've obviously talked about today. Maybe two concrete examples. One is Activia, a brand we're really proud of, one of our yogurt brands, clearly in the gut health space. We launched 2 weeks ago a product called Activia Proactive, which is a product which has both pre and probiotics, importantly in the context of today's yogurt market, 10 grams of protein and no added sugar. So a kind of a super yogurt, if I can describe it in that way. The second one is a bit of maybe a sneak peek and of something that's coming later in the year. Obviously, the GLP-1 phenomenon in this country is fast scaling.
Right.
We have a deep understanding through healthcare professionals, a deep understanding through talking to patients on those medications of what's core to their needs. And we have proprietary technology that can support their gut health maintenance, but really importantly, muscle retention as they lose weight. and we can deliver that in a yogurt form.
Something complementary to people who might be on those medications.
That will support them on that journey and provide the kind of nutrition needs that are really core to that journey. So more to come later in the year.
All right, you'll bring those next year.
We'll
and
happily
we'll give it
bring
a
those
shot.
next year.
Shane,
And we'll do another on stage.
Great. I'm taking this with me when I go backstage. Shane, great to see you again. Thanks to Danone. Stick around. The conversations continue.
Please welcome to the stage Axios healthcare reporter Maya Goldman.
Hello, so good to be here. Thank you so much for coming to our Future of Health Summit. My name is Maya Goldman. I cover healthcare here at Axios, and I'm co-author of the Axios Vitals newsletter. Don't forget to use the hashtag Axios Future of Health to follow along online with today's conversations. I'm so excited to welcome our next guest, who joins us from his post at the White House, where he serves as an advisor to HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's also the co-founder of healthcare company TrueMed and the author of Good Energy. Please welcome Callie Means. Thanks for being here, Callie. It's been a busy couple months for you.
I've been meditating today.
Yeah, good.
No fights with the audience.
So I want to start, I'm going to jump right in because we have so much to get through. President Trump created the Make America Healthy Again Commission, and it's scheduled to release its report really soon, by the end of the month, on causes of poor child health and potential solutions. What can we expect to see from that report? Give us a preview.
I think there's a little bit of misinformation or misunderstanding of this. I really think this report and what the administration is trying to do is something everybody should be supportive of. So when Secretary Kennedy was sworn in, President Trump signed an executive order. It said, I want an assessment of why kids are getting sick in 100 days. Not the full scientific data on everything or the consensus view, because we don't have it, but an analysis of where the government should look at of why kids are getting sick. And then 80 days from that, 80 days from May 22nd, when this initial report's released, some policy ideas. So the report coming out is going to be the strongest statement in the history of the US government that 95% of healthcare spending is chronic disease. And chronic disease is not an issue of needing to spend more on healthcare. We spend 4 times more than most European countries per capita on healthcare. We're living 7 years less than the Italians. As we sit here today, I just calculated, as we sit here today, 3,254 teens will get prediabetes. 38% of US teens have prediabetes. So what the report's going to go into, very deliberately, not policy. It's the factors of what's leading to this devastating chronic disease crisis. And that clearly has to do with the fact that 70% of a child's diet today is ultra-processed food. 0% of the diet was that 100 years ago. Clearly it has to do with the fact that we're so sedentary that 77% of military-aged youth in America aren't eligible to join the military, that an average teen spends 8 hours a day looking at a phone. Clearly it has to do with environmental toxins. It has to do with that in America, we are ingesting 25% of the world's pesticides with 4% of the world's population. The fact that our leading pesticides that we use in the United States and herbicides, many of them are phased out or fully banned in every other developed country in the world. And yes, absolutely has to do with over-medicalization. Is the fact that 25% of US women, the fact that they're on an antidepressant of some kind, is that leading to lower suicide rates and better mental health? Is the fact that 18% of teens being on a stimulant leading to better outcomes in children? Is the fact that 35% of teens are on a pharmaceutical product making them more healthy? The assessment just gives the facts, and I do think it is an important time in American history with skyrocketing rates of chronic disease, particularly among kids, to assess that and have an adult bipartisan conversation about how to reverse these trends. That is what the report is going to do. And it's interesting, I'll just say this, there's relentless lobbying, not about the policy, but about releasing the truth that everyone knows. I cannot tell you how many lobbyists tell us, you're going to scare the American people. You're going to confuse moms. You can't do this to consumers. People that have been on this stage, their lobbyists are saying that. There's an infantilization of the American public that's shocking to see, and there's a war on the American public having transparency. And this administration, I'm very inspired by it. There's very complicated policy issues to discuss on ultra-processed food, on pesticides, on medicalization, but they are not going to take lobbyist input on releasing the truth to the American people.
You mentioned pesticides. It doesn't seem like there's consensus across the entire Trump administration on where to go with that. What are you hearing?
President Trump said throughout the campaign specifically that he wants to look at pesticides and he wants the truth on pesticides. Now, the policy, again, this report is on the truth. It's on the dynamics. It is a fact that we ingest 25% of the world's pesticides in the United States, and many of our leading pesticides have other countries across the world have chosen to phase them out or ban them, calling them carcinogenic and disruptive to kids. Those are the facts. Those are easily Googleable. The United States government has never recognized those facts. When you get to policy, and I want to make this clear, I don't think anyone in the Trump administration, and I don't think it's the right policy to say that insinuates that we need to have some kind of European anti-growth regulatory nanny state. Like this is the party, and I believe I'm in the party of Elon Musk, who saw an environmental catastrophe that everyone on the left was complaining about for years and years and years, and has become the greatest environmentalist in the history of modern civilization that now the left attacks 100% by driving free market innovation with Tesla. People are snickering. I've meditated. I'm not getting fights with the audience today. I'm not doing it. Please. Okay. So
Deep breath.
so I just want to say, to the lobbyists that are, pestering people in the administration, pestering Congress to not print easily searchable facts that nobody disagrees on, that's not going to work. But the policy solutions from this are not obvious. Pesticides are deeply ingrained into the U.S. agriculture system, and it would be a disaster to phase them out tomorrow. Nobody's suggesting that. What we do need to have, with, I believe, almost genocidal levels of children's chronic disease right now, we do need to have a very careful conversation about what world we are building for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to take lobbying advice on releasing facts.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit to another topic that's in the news today, Medicaid. How important is Medicaid, in your opinion, in general as a program, and specifically to hospitals and people in rural locations?
I mean, it's extremely important for people to have health care, but I think the Democrats are on a completely losing message that the only thing standing between the United States citizens and better health care is more spending and more bureaucracy, which is explicitly what their argument is. Their explicit argument is that Medicaid is great and we just need to have more of it. I think what the Trump administration is doing clearly is exercising the voter mandate that was very clear in this administration, election, is that the healthcare system is a dumpster fire. It's totally broken. We are the sickest country in the world. We have the sickest kids in the world, and we spend 3 to 4 times more than any other country in the world on healthcare costs. So with Medicaid, it's been very clear benefits aren't being cut. But I'll tell you, and this, I'm on the MAHA stuff, and I've been working with colleagues at the White House who are experts at Medicare and Medicaid policy. The waste, fraud, and abuse is breathtaking and shocking. And I think the Trump administration's point that we are going bankrupt from healthcare costs and getting sicker at the same time, and we in these in the budget proposals are going to take a sledgehammer to waste, fraud, and abuse, which clearly exists, I think is what the American people want.
Yeah. So the proposals that the House of Representatives is marking up, I think, right now, there are varying estimates of how many people would lose coverage as a result, but it's safe to say that it would be in the millions. So are you saying that they're all...
Oh, no, that's misinformation. That's total misinformation. No, it's very clear. Some illegal immigrants will lose coverage. California is breaking their neck to try to protect illegal coverage for illegal immigrants. I mean, they're outwardly trying to break the law as it exists right now to do that. People that absolutely demonstrably refuse and have no interest in working when they're able-bodied under the proposal would have Medicaid phased out. And I think that's about an 80% issue of people that agree with that. So I think that's totally incorrect. People that should not be getting Medicaid would be phased out of the program, but you had that number. Who that eligible for Medicaid or isn't not working when they could be working and not even actively looking for jobs, and we don't even know if they have another job on the table. What are you referring to?
Well, there's some numbers, I think KFF perhaps, I think is the source, that
about 2/3 of people that are on Medicaid actively work. So I think
Right, so that's 1/3 are not actively
Yeah.
looking for jobs or working whatsoever, and many of them, according to reports, have jobs out of the table. I've meditated. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Okay, thank you. So let's switch gears again.
Yeah,
Gabby.
there's nobody, that is complete misinformation. The proposal is clear.
So I want to talk about trust.
Yeah.
It's well known that there's a crisis of trust in the country's public health agencies. That's something you've been very vocal about wanting to fix. What do you think laying off thousands of healthcare policy administrators and then hiring some back, what does that do to trust?
Oh, I don't know if you've ever run a business, but when you're dealing with the literal largest department in the history of human civilization, which is HHS, it has the largest budget of any department of government in the world, and it regulates and oversees and is integrated with the largest part of the US economy, and you have a voter mandate to reform that institution, which is hopelessly broken and producing worse outcomes with higher costs. The correct thing to do is move decisively to do that, and I can't imagine any world where some course corrections need to be made. So the fact that the media, I think it's shameful. I honestly think it's shameful. You should be talking about the 38% of teens who have prediabetes, who are getting crushed in this country. But you are talking, not you, maybe, but many reporters, it's just an open sieve to career officials at the FDA giving you anecdotes. Oh, this program was cut, this person was cut who's sympathetic, this program that sounded good was cut. That's a choice. That's not reporting the story. Hold on. The story is that Bobby Kennedy has a spiritual mandate, I believe, a mandate from voters to reform our broken institution. To reform the broken institution, take a sledgehammer, I'm going to do it. Take a sledgehammer to the people in this audience who are laughing, who profit from a system where kids are sick. Everyone who works in major healthcare industries may be good people, I don't know, but they are fundamentally, as an economic fact, are profiting more when people are sicker for longer periods of time. What Bobby Kennedy was given a mandate to do is we are not going to be tolerant of companies that profit from kids being sick. I commend the person before. I commend him for, his only mistake was not complimenting Bobby Kennedy and complimenting him and giving him credit for the fact that they're being forced to take poisons out of their food. I think he's incorrect saying that the way to grow muscle is take bioengineered food instead of lifting a weight. But the fact that there's this cultural change is because of Bobby Kennedy. The idea that you look at the NIH, with the assessment of the CIA, the Energy Department, and 5 other major government bodies, that the CIA funded the creation of a global pandemic that cost $25 trillion. That's the NIH's record. The NIH funded the creation of the global pandemic. They have not done one study that Jay Bhattacharya could find. Can you find one example? Can you report one example in the past 5 years of the NIH funding research that has led to their mission of a demonstrable impact on longevity or an improvement of chronic disease? The idea that these agencies overseeing the record of healthcare in America right now should not be fundamentally reformed, that the employee levels shouldn't be taken back to levels they were 7 years ago. It's absurd. It's absurd.
So do you think that firing all these workers and then not being clear, there are about 10,000
70,000 workers at the HHS.
10,000 workers that were fired.
All these workers. That's an interesting statement.
Do you think that firing all of them, all 10,000 of those people, and then hiring some back and not being clear about exactly who's being hired back and when? I'm just curious.
I think it is a scandal that you are talking to and the media is just on the phone with career employees finding anecdotes and not talking about the civilizational efforts this administration is undertaking to reverse chronic disease. And I think that the snickers in the audience, you guys have zero leverage with the American people. Like you have zero leverage with the American people. The American people, and I have a message for the pharma people in the audience, the American people have a crisis of trust in your industry. They have a crisis of trust. No, the American people have a crisis in trust in healthcare institutions because the medical system and medical leaders absolutely boldface lied to them during the COVID pandemic because drug prices for many leading drugs are 10 times higher than they are in Germany and Sweden for drugs that are made in America and have the exact same packaging of the exact same drugs.
Okay.
Because, that is the mandate. That is why Secretary Kennedy is the most popular cabinet secretary in the country. That is why Bobby Kennedy is the second most popular, he's the second most popular political figure in America behind President Trump. Oh, really? They're a Democrat?
Well, let's talk a little bit more
I don't
about
want to,
that.
this misinformation here is very concerning, honestly. They're saying there's a Democrat that's more popular than Bobby Kennedy or President Trump. I'd like to see that.
Let's talk about the interactions between MAHA and MAGA. In the past couple days, there have been some high-profile, disagreements between you and some other figures in these spaces on X. Take us behind that tension. What is that fundamental tension there?
I think that this is a coalition that is one of the most important realignments of American politics in the past 100 years. You had the gender gap closed dramatically. You had moms that considered themselves hippie that would have never considered voting for President Trump, vote for President Trump. You had young people vote 50-50 for President Trump. You had independents vote 50-50. So this idea of tapping into this deep pain and deep anger people feel for the childhood chronic disease crisis is a new arrangement in politics. I mean, just flatly, there's a medical freedom community that I very much sympathize with and agree with on almost everything, that we have to give patients more control and autonomy over their medical freedom. And there's a lot of conspiracies and a lot of chatter on Twitter. We don't, can litigate as much as you want, but I think it represents to me that there is high stakes.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually one of the powers of the movement that a lot of people really care and are holding people accountable.
We're out of time.
Yeah.
One more question, yes or no. Can MAHA and MAGA coexist?
Oh, President Trump and Secretary Kennedy are in total lockstep. I'll just say this, from the heart, I am blown away by how much President Trump understands this issue and is empowering Secretary Kennedy to take transformational action to reform our institutions, to install gold star science, and reverse the childhood chronic disease crisis. I am inspired by the deep conversations that Secretary Kennedy is having with Lee Zeldin at the EPA, Brooke Rollins at the USDA. The administration is in total lockstep. There's always going to be mid-level staffers leaking. We're trying to disrupt the people in this audience who profit from kids being sick, and they will be hiring lobbyists to set up war rooms against my sister, to sow division, whatever. But at the highest level, despite the media narrative that's inevitable when you're disrupting the largest institution in the country, that there's division, there is lockstep alignment of pro-growth policies to take a sledgehammer to these devastating health outcomes. That I said I wouldn't do it, but it's just amazing. It's just amazing. This audience is snickering at the fact that we have the sickest kids in the world. It's shameful.
It's time to wrap up, but thank you so much. Yeah. We could talk about it. There's a lot more we could touch on, but thank you, Callie.
Thank you.
Welcoming back, Tina Reed.
Hello again, everyone. I am hoping to have a very interesting follow-up to that, although I don't know if we can compete. Our next guest has been a leader in digital health for quite some time, and he's fresh off the heels of some interesting AI development. So please welcome to the stage ZocDoc CEO and founder, Dr. Oliver Karas. Well, thank you so much for being here today. So obviously we are going to be talking about something that's a very timely topic, which is AI. But I wanted to start, I've been covering ZocDoc for quite a while. I think a lot of people in this room have probably used it before, but in the time I've been covering it, you've changed a lot. So could you just start by reintroducing us to what ZocDoc does now?
Yeah, absolutely. So ZocDoc, for those of you who haven't tried it out, download the app, it's completely free. But we got started with the fundamental insight that it's very hard for a patient to actually get access to care. When we launched nearly 20 years ago, it took 26 days from the time a patient picked up the phone and started dialing for doctors till they actually saw one. And when we were doing our research, we heard time and time again, of course, there's a shortage of doctors, and whenever there's a shortage of anything, people need to queue up and take their turn. And our insight at the time was, no. Doctors actually, they have last-minute availability. There is reserve capacity because there are last-minute cancellations, no-shows, reschedules. And it's really a problem that a very expensive, perishable resource, up to 30% of a doctor's time, goes to waste because the patient and the doctor can't meet up. And we decided to start ZocDoc as a clearinghouse to do that. Now we have a long history at this point. We still do this marketplace, this clearinghouse, but we have a much broader product offering for providers now, where we help them distribute their availability to their own website, to places like Google or insurance directories, or for the Veterans Administration. And we help them more recently also answer the phone with a technology solution. That's kind of ironic for us because we got started to get people off the phone, and now that was driven by the fact that when you call a doctor's office, you're on hold for a long time. People abandon it. They end up not getting care where they should, and there wasn't really a good solution for that until recently, where AI sort of opens the door to make this a much different, much better experience.
So let's talk about that new chatbot that you rolled out that uses AI.
Yeah, so we have a voice AI agent that does a number of things. It can pick up the phone and have a natural conversation with a patient to figure out what they need, why they're calling the office, like answer simple questions of like, where can I park, and do I need to fast, and what other things. But it can also take a scheduling conversation from beginning to end. It's completely autonomous in its way. It doesn't require human supervision. It will take care of 70% of the calls that are incoming, and the remaining calls are third shorter because the AI can already pre-credential the patient, can make sure it goes to the specific right human to take that call, and that human has a summary of why the patient is calling right in front of them when they pick up the phone.
Can you talk a little bit about what went into creating this tool? Because as you and I were talking about it, people at first, at least in certain parts of the country, might have found it a little bit rude.
Yeah, so it's funny. So I grew up in Germany, of course, so I might be rude by default. But also then, to further make things worse, I live in New York, and so we trained the initial version of Zoe, which is the name of our AI agent, in New York, and we made it so that New Yorkers really liked it. And then we started rolling it out, and one of our first markets was Georgia. It turns out that this New Yorker AI agent kept interrupting people that called in, and we realized, oh no, we have to invest more in cadence adjustment and end of utterance detection, and make sure that we give folks a chance to complete what they want to say, and that things like kindly, which was not in the vocabulary of our New York-based bot, means yes, right? And so I think there's a lot of things that you need to learn, and that's on the surface level. Obviously, I think that voice AI in general is going to be a commodity in the future, but then you have to infuse it with the domain expertise, right? And actually, I'd like to take a mini poll, if I may. Who in the room has already had interactions with a voice AI customer service agent? Show of hands. Oh, quite a few, actually. So I'm going to make a prediction. I might be wrong, but I don't think I will be. If we ask the same question next year, 100% of hands will be up, because that is really becoming a commodity. What is difficult is to infuse it with domain expertise, where you understand, okay, how do people talk about insurances? How do they talk about where their insurance card might be, right? How do they articulate what the visit reason is that they're coming in for, and adjusting that to the business logic that a doctor's office may have at the back end of this. So I think there's a really amazing journey of productivity ahead of us.
Yeah. I know as a healthcare reporter, when people ask me about AI, they say, okay, so when are the bots going to replace our doctors? And I think that says a lot about, what probably can't happen more than anything, because the answer is probably never, or at least not for a very long time, because there's a lot that we can't do necessarily. But where we're seeing a lot of innovation is where you've spoken about with the AI agents. Can you talk about sort of how it's been evolving?
Yeah, so from what we've seen doing our work, it is, even in a very prescribed and sort of defined conversational space, like setting an appointment or what you talk to with a doctor's office, there's thousands and thousands of edge cases that you need to teach individually. And so, for a conversation with a doctor that has massively higher degrees of freedom, I think it's probably uneconomic to train an AI at the current state. I think it will remain uneconomic to do that, for some time to come. But maybe just to walk through the thought process that we had in focusing on Zoe and this voice AI. So we started studying this a few years ago. I brought in a chief AI officer, and we were sort of mapping out what the likely evolution of AI is going to be. And we realized, okay, there's going to be this first wave of what I like to call assistive AI. It's like your eager intern, right? Like that works for you, but that requires supervision. And we saw a lot of this in sort of that first wave. I would call it like the 2024 AI wave, where we had the scribes. And what is typical of them is that they take parts of the work on, but they still require humans to make sure that they're not coming up with stuff. And what happens in these situations is that you need to do a lot of work on change management. People need to change their behavior. And then there's this constant tug of war, whether the productivity increase accrues to the entity that invested in this AI or to the worker, right, that can finish their task sooner, but then maybe has more spare time. And we looked at that and said, well, that's going to be a tricky thing to do precisely right. And we just said we're going to leapfrog that assistive AI phase, and we go to autonomous AI. And we wanted to create a bot that can actually take a task from start to finish, right, without any human supervision, where we know we have constrained it in a way that there are not going to be any hallucinations. We can answer for what this AI does at any step of that conversation. And we give it the working memory and all the things that you would expect from a human interaction, so you don't have to repeat yourself or talk around what you say or say it in 3 different ways. But now you capture this productivity immediately, and it has a clear and defined ROI, and you also don't need to change anyone's actual job. Like either the AI finishes the job or the human does what the human did before, right? And so I think that's the state of affairs for 2025. As we look into the future, I think there's a really interesting phase of augmentative AI, where it's really superhuman, and obviously it will do things like speak all languages known to man, and maybe listen to me and detect that I'm an unfriendly German, and offer me the conversation in German to begin with. But maybe it can also do things like, based on the conversation, determine what my no-show likelihood is, right? Which is not easy for humans to do, but an AI can actually be trained on that. And then you can say, well, how do I help this patient to actually show up? Do I need to get transportation? Maybe I don't need to do this for everyone, but if your no-show chance is over a certain percentage, maybe I start doing that. Maybe I have a special reminder regime, and I have other sort of scaffolding available to the patient to make sure that they can actually take advantage of everything that modern medicine has to offer.
And I feel like with every iteration, it just keeps getting faster and faster. How far are we from from that being reality?
So I think this is already working in the lab. I think for a reputable company put their brand behind it, I think we're probably 12 month or 18 months away, but could be sooner. So this is not something where you should say, oh, I'm going to put this in my annual planning cycle for 2027. This is something where you can immediately get tremendous productivity increases, right? If you just think about the no-show rates among physicians. We constantly talk about physician shortage still. Even though ZocDoc exists and you can find any specialty you want and can see them within 24 hours, people still talk about, oh, there's not enough doctors around. Well, how about we just make sure that the doctors that are available and have time slots available, that these time slots are actually filled?
What about the regulatory hurdles that you face? What's ahead? What are you working on?
So we have always, like obviously heavily regulated industry, and we have had like multiple iterations of ZocDoc over the years. And I have to say, I mean, I grew up in Germany. I'm a U.S. citizen. I have all the fervor of the convert, for the U.S. It's really my goal to create market forces in healthcare and help us, organize us a lot more efficiently. And I personally have only good things to say about the process. I've gotten a lot of support on the Hill in various administrations. I think there's obviously always more to do. There's more to streamline. I think there are obviously many times valid concerns about what could happen, because not every player has sort of good intentions. I think so far everyone thinks that ZocDoc has good intentions, but but obviously you need to be thoughtful when you design a large system with many players. I think there's a lot of no nonsense and common sense regulation that could be updated. One of the things that we are working on is a regulation that's from 1972. That's when the fax machine was the hot technology of the day. I mean, obviously that doesn't translate one-to-one to the internet, and then you can just even with just a simple clarification of what these various words mean in today's world would be very helpful, for us to know what the solution space is in which we play.
And then as a company trying to integrate into so many pieces of the healthcare system with an AI product, how do you compete when other companies themselves are already creating their own internal AI products?
Yeah, see, I think this is one of the actually misguided approaches in US healthcare, is that everyone is trying to create their own walled garden. And when 20 years ago, when I started to think about what do I want to build, I thought about, hey, someone has to create the connective tissue, right? Because otherwise, the doctors on our platform, they use one of over nearly 150 different electronic health records. So if every electronic health record has their own scheduling solution, there is no bird's eye view across all doctors as to what's available for a patient. And so we have to pull this together, and our goal is to really put that infrastructure out there and make it available for everyone to access it. And we are making some good progress. We are starting to work with payers. We're working with the Veterans Administration, actually, who uses ZocDoc to book veterans into community care physicians as part of the Mission Act. And so what used to take weeks, for one of these VA agents to find a doctor that can actually see the veteran and negotiate that appointment, they did 3-way phone calls to do that, can now be done in minutes. And that appointment is much closer to the time for the veteran, so that we don't have them wait for weeks and weeks and weeks to get care. And that's sort of how I imagine we can turn everything into a much smoother system. There's also enormous benefits for the providers to buy into this open system, because if you're a provider and you are an EHR X, then you're an EHR X. But if you set yourself up with ZocDoc, well, you can continue to stay on your EHR and have all the functionality of that EHR, but now suddenly it flows through to the VA. Suddenly it can flow through Google. It can flow to your own website. It can flow to ZocDoc.com. It can flow to other insurance companies and other ecosystem partners. So it's one touch point that gives you actually complete visibility over your surface to patients, and can make sure that you really have the most efficient and streamlined experience. And now with Zoe, it is completely complete because we also cover the phone.
We're coming up on time, but final question. We're here in DC crowd. What have your impressions been so far about working with the Trump administration with this transition to a new administration, and how you message to them?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'm dressed up like this with a tie, as we heard earlier, because I just spent the last 2 days in the White House and on the Hill. And look, ZocDoc has always been bipartisan. Everything we do is sort of common sense and has typically buy-in from both Republicans and Democrats. What we're seeing right now is an administration that obviously is trying to sort of get to grips. There's a lot of new people, other people have moved on, and so there's this reseeding of knowledge and full understanding of the issues. But what's clear in my conversation, what I've heard multiple times from various people, I won't attribute it to anyone, but what I've heard is, hey, we want to differentiate ourselves from the prior administration by being willing to listen and take input from stakeholders and really make sure that people feel empowered to shape what the country is doing. And look, whatever you may think about the overall policy agendas, but having someone competing on, I want to be a good listener and a good partner, I don't see how this could be bad for anyone involved. And because you can sit in DC and you won't have necessarily the detailed firsthand knowledge of what's happening on the ground and vice versa. And so that exchange I can only see as something promising.
Well, Dr. Keirs, thank you so much for your time.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Axios Pro Healthcare Policy Reporter, Victoria Knight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Knight. I co-author our Axios Pro Healthcare Policy newsletter with my colleague Peter Sullivan, who you'll hear from in a bit. Our newsletter delivers real-time policy news and congressional insights for the healthcare industry. So if you're interested in subscribing, be sure to head to axios.com/pro to learn more. Up next, another leading voice from Capitol Hill. He's the co-chair of the GOP Doctors Caucus, a licensed urologist. Please welcome North Carolina Congressman Greg Murphy. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Is everybody awake? We pulled an all-nighter last night in Ways and Means, so if I nod off, no, I'm not going to. So.
You took my first question. I was going to say, how much sleep are you running on?
None.
Is there anything big happening on Capitol Hill today?
No, it's a bunch of lollygagging.
Not too much. Not one of the biggest weeks in healthcare, I feel like, in a while. So obviously, reconciliation and markups are all the talk of Capitol Hill this week. Ways and Means, which you're a member of, just passed their portion of the reconciliation bill this morning. There were some GOP healthcare priorities in the bill. I feel like they weren't really touched on as much, or maybe covered as much, because everything was talking about tax, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts of those provisions that were in the bill, and how do they kind of help push the GOP healthcare agenda forward?
Sure. I'll look at my three personal priorities. I'm a surgeon by trade. I actually still see patients because I think it helps me. First of all, I love what I do. I think my patients appreciate it, and it helps me stay relevant in the world of medicine. There are three things I'd like to accomplish. I want to stabilize our physician fee schedule. I think it's personally ridiculous that we've now propped up insurance companies, we've propped up hospitals, and we don't pay the people who actually deliver the health care in the country, and I say that from my colleagues. So second of all, we need massive health insurance reform. Sorry for any of their health insurance people out here, but you guys have the biggest lobby in this town, and it is a chokehold on American medicine. Third, I could have third, fourth, and probably fifth. There's some things we do in medicine that are pretty antithetical to what we're doing delivery of care. One of my pet peeves is direct consumer advertising. We're one of 2 countries in the world that do it. I've never, in 35 years, prescribed a drug because one of my patients saw it on television. And it drives up cost and it drives up utilization because the worried well love to come in and drive up cost. And so we have to get control of what we're doing with our healthcare dollar. If you've heard from some of the other folks here about our results of what we're paying for in medicine in this country and healthcare, it's ridiculous. And so trying really to get a handle on this, I'm an equal opportunity offender in everybody in the healthcare space because I want it to be the best in the world and also the most affordable in the world.
So if you had to describe the GOP healthcare agenda in just a few words, how would you describe it and the vision from Republicans?
Yeah, I think if you have to pick one word with the administration that we've had so far, it's accountability. It's a reset. You look at our nation's history in the last 250 years, we've actually never done this. I ran a practice. People have run businesses. We always sit back and doing those things. You sit back and say, what are you doing right? What are you doing wrong? And I think if you have to look at our healthcare system, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Why are we pouring hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars into a system that is not delivering the best healthcare? We have some very poor outcomes compared to the world, and we're spending trillions of dollars to do this.
So we're trying to be accountable to this, both in the Medicare space as well as in the Medicaid space. We need to deliver the product to the individuals who deserve those benefits, who are eligible for those benefits, and get back to actually making sure that the doctor-patient relationship is primal.
And you just mentioned Medicaid. That was going to be my next question. So it's a huge topic in Congress this week.
Sure.
ENC, I think, Energy and Commerce, is finishing up their markup as we speak, I believe.
They're a little lower than Ways and Means. We're much better than they are.
Yeah, Ways and Means, was it 17 hours? Is that right?
Yeah, we were much more efficient.
Yeah. Energy and Commerce is going on 25, I believe. So
a little slow over there.
What is your view, though, on, I know you're not on the committee, but you're going to eventually vote on this bill,
sure.
On the changes to the Medicaid program that ENC is proposing? And, there's quite a bit. There's, you're freezing provider taxes. There's a cap on state-directed payments.
Yeah.
There's work requirements, federal work requirements for the first time. What are your thoughts on how this will change Medicaid?
Sure, and let me just preface it by saying I've worked at the bedside. I've run a surgical practice. I was chief of staff of a close to 1,000-bed hospital with 9 other hospitals. I was the senior chair of health policy in North Carolina, so I kind of know the A to Z to this. It's okay for us to look at a system. During the Biden years, no state was allowed really to audit its Medicaid rolls. There are eligibility requirements. Pregnant females, impoverished children, disabled or impoverished seniors. Those are the eligibility criteria for who should be in Medicaid. So if you're not allowed to audit the rolls, you had at one point in time 1 in 4 Americans on Medicaid. I still see patients. Actually, my practice has been a very, very poor payer mix, 74% government, either Medicare, Medicaid, or no insurance. I see these patients on a daily basis, and while most fit the criteria, the eligibility criteria, I still see individuals who I know should not be on Medicaid. We just have to get back to a system where we're delivering the product for the individuals who deserve this. So I think what ENC is trying to do is a couple different things. The main thing is to slow the growth rate. It's a sad fact in the state of North Carolina right now, 52% of the births in the state of North Carolina are born to mothers on Medicaid. How did we get there? How did we get there to that particular spot? So that's a criminal indictment of what's going on in healthcare. It's a criminal indictment of what's going on really in our fertility system. How do we deliver where we can get it right? You look at where states have been, the hospitals have been taxing themselves, sending it up to the federal government to bring a bigger pay down. It's a gaming of the system. Do we need that to keep some rural hospitals alive? Yes. Should we have real rich hospitals gaming the system? They should not. And then also, if you look at what the other stabilization of of the payments should be, it's okay to look back and do this. The last thing I want, and I live in a very rural part of eastern North Carolina. Has anybody ever been to the Outer Banks? Thank you for bringing your tourist dollars down. Half the room rings up. It's great. But we have a lot of poor individuals that live in our part of the state. We want to make sure that they're taken care of. But we need a system that is robust, that is definable, that is sustainable to make sure that we deliver the health care to the individuals who qualify.
The Congressional Budget Office is estimating that these changes in the Medicaid program could result in millions more people losing health insurance coverage, though. Democrats are already messaging on these numbers. Do you think Republicans need to have an answer on how to address those who may be uninsured?
Yeah, guys, I'm a scientist at heart. We're taught in medical school, at least we used to be taught in medical school, when you pick up a journal not to believe a damn thing in it. I've been very, very disappointed in the Congressional Budget Office. I really have. They said, the IRA was going to cost $300 or $400 billion. It's over now $1.25 trillion. I just can't believe their numbers. The last thing is, I don't want people kicking off who should be eligible. If you look at states like California, they're allowing individuals on Medicaid who are not by definition, they're asylees, they're people who have supposed to be deported, that have not left the country yet, that are eligible for Medicaid. Those individuals should not be here, or should not be on the system. We had a debacle, and I think this is an 80-20 issue of what happened during the last administration, allowing, depending upon what you count, 11 to 20 million individuals come in the country illegally. Why we're providing health care to those when we can't provide it to our own individuals, our own people, I think that's an indictment of a system. We need to get back to, again, making sure the system is there for those American citizens and American people who qualify for those benefits, making sure that that is a deliverable product.
You got one of your reconciliation priorities in the in the Energy and Commerce bill, the inflationary fix for the Medicare physician payment cut.
Yeah.
Is that enough for you, that
No.
inflationary fix, or are you hoping for more?
It's not. It's and believe me, I'm glad they tried. There are 3 components to that. Number one is fix the fee schedule. It's a 2.62, I believe, % cut this past year. If you look at what's happened to the fee schedule, it's been over the last 20 years about a 30% decrease. Guys, my practice, when I had to resign from it, my younger partners, we had gone several quarters without taking a paycheck. You know, when you own a practice, when you own a business, you pay your light bills, you have to pay your staff before you take a paycheck. And my younger partners, when I had to resign, I said, here, let me turn it over to you. This is how you stay private. And they said, no, we can't do it anymore. It's terrible because I think employed physicians, God bless, we have them. It's now 70 or close to 80%. They don't work as hard. They cost the system more, and it's not as an efficient part of practice. And so if you look at where we're trying to go, we need to get the physician fee schedule stabilized. Number 2, there has to be an index for inflation. And then also, if CMS has utilization reviews, if it triggers a certain point at 20 million, all of a sudden the new formula kicks in, and then all of a sudden you'd kick out another cut. I've tried to introduce, or I have introduced, legislation to put a bigger window in there. I'm happy that ENC at least helped with the MEI index, but it's not enough for me. It's 8.9 billion, needs to be 15 to stabilize the system. There's no reason our docs should be flat-footed from the past cuts of the last 2 years. And I've made that known. It's not a big ask, good gosh. When we have the SALT people that are asking for $1 trillion, it's not enough. It's not too much to ask to actually let our people survive on the Medicare patients that they're kind enough to see.
What is the next step for trying to get that full doc fix that you're wanting?
Well, I could stand and be on the House floor and rant and rave like some of my colleagues do. I'm not that kind of guy, but I've made it very clear to leadership I'm not going to vote on a product that doesn't fix it completely.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
Is that your red line?
I'm not one of these red line people, but this is my, let's say, beige line. I'm not going to split hairs. This needs to get done. Yeah. It needs to get done. I've been here, 5.5 years? It seems like I've been here like 400 years. But I'm tired of dealing with this year after year after year and seeing it in the face of the people who are up at 2 o'clock in the morning taking care of your grandmother. It's time that we fix this system. It's ridiculous, and we're giving hospital bumps every year. We're giving insurance company bump. I mean, hell, the MA program's got a 5% bump last month. Don't get me started on MA either. I've already been up. I'll be cranky. I'll be cranky as hell because I'll talk about that.
Well, you may have the chance now.
Oh, look out. Everybody take their tone.
More broadly, if you think about this current moment in time, there's a lot of consumer anger at health insurance companies. I think we've all seen that, especially, a lot around the price of healthcare as well. What do you think the GOP answer should be for addressing these patient concerns?
Well, let's pick on Medicare Advantage. All right, that's just it's an easy one to pick on because they've created a target on themselves. This was a program, it was a good program. You want to go into people's homes, you want to see where their health care is, what their needs are to try to keep them out of the hospital, keep them healthy. It was supposed to be 95% of fee-for-service. It's now 120%. And the problem is you've had companies, sorry, I'm just going to call it out, United, that have taken advantage of a system. They go in and you can walk into somebody's house who's stone cold healthy, and they'll come out with 15 diagnoses to the tune of $50 billion of upcoding for people that had, quote, diseases that never received medical treatment. And so it's these aberrations, and it's fraud, if you ask my opinion of fraud. It's not illegal, as I was told by one of their CMOs, but it's fraud. It's taking advantage of a system that was not supposed to be that way. And we have to go about that. The American people are demanding it. And sadly enough, you see on television, you see good old Joe, who was Joe? Name it, thank you. I was going to say Montana, but I've been up a little while. But you see that, you see JJ, people that, senior people trust, but they're delivering a product that, first of all, is deny, deny, deny. And I can give you a personal story about that, but I won't bore you. It's deny the health care and then not pay the people who deliver the health care, and guess where the profits go? To people in the insurance industry. We got to stop that nonsense. No one else in the world does this. And the middleman, as I've said to the president, is destroying American medicine. So let's get back to where the doctor-patient is the most important thing, and let the pharmaceutical industry and the health insurance industry stay in their lane, do their job, make their profits, but not squeeze out everything from the system.
You also mentioned, I think at the top, that you're really passionate about cracking down on direct-to-consumer advertising of pharmaceuticals. Tell me why and what your solution would be.
Well, I tell a little story about, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, I had a patient come into me and he looked at me quite smugly. He says, "Doc, I know what drug I need." I was like, "Oh, really?" So he pulls out this little piece of paper he'd written down. He saw this great ad on, this is the drug I need. And I was like, "Oh, wow, you're just a genius." And he looks at me and I said, this is a great drug. And he looks real smug and I said, "It's just one problem." He said, "What's that, Doc?" And I said, "You don't have that disease." So this is a problem. We're one of 2 countries in the world. They spend, zillions of dollars on this. The advertisers hate that I'm going after it because guess who pays for the midnight or the evening news? But I'm so tired of the fact that every American in this room, every person in this room knows what Keytruda is, right? Raise your hand if you ever heard the drug Keytruda. All right, come on. Some of you are lying. You've heard it. And so it's not delivering anything of value to our system in healthcare, and it's causing a ridiculous cost to healthcare. And that's just one of the things that we just don't need in America. We just don't need it. And so the other country is New Zealand, where you have 4 million people and 16 million sheep, and who the hell needs it over there either? So I think RFK is online to do something about this. It's a First Amendment issue, but you know what? I love our pharmaceutical industry because I've seen in the last decade the magnificent cures that we have had to people. I used to tell people, I used to have the discussions, it's time to get your affairs in order from cancer. And a lot of times I don't have to have that discussion now. I can say, hey, you're going to see your kids graduate from college, or hey, you're going to see your grandchild get married. And so there have been such wonderful advancements. Let's not pollute the system with things that don't provide any value.
So would your solution be to ban these type of advertisements completely?
We don't need it. We don't need it. I need it in my medical journals because I'm the target audience. I'm the one who's making decisions. That's where patients trust their doctors, or they're supposed to. And they're the ones who come to us for our opinion. That's what your doctor's supposed to do. We don't need it on television.
All right, we're already over time because we've been having such an interesting conversation, but I get to ask one fun question before we go. You hold multiple titles as you're both a physician and a member of Congress. Which title do you prefer?
It's funny. When I first got to Congress, my staff said, "Well, what do we call you, doctor or congressman?" And I said, "Well, think about it for a second. If you look at levels of approval, always number 1 are nurses, doctors, and pharmacists, and then you have members of Congress way down here." And so they said, "Yes, Dr. Murphy." So I feel really sad for the members of Congress who are used car salesmen because they're really screwed because they can't do anything down below. So.
All right, I've had it wrong all day then. Dr. Murphy, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks as always for being a part of the Axios conversation. We so appreciate it. I know you have to go to run to a House vote now, right?
Yeah, they have these damn things called votes we have every day. So.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And now, introducing Axios Pro healthcare policy reporter, Peter Sullivan.
Hi, thanks again for joining us. I'm Peter Sullivan, along with Victoria, who you just saw, the other co-author of our Healthcare Policy Pro newsletter, so please sign up for that. One note before we continue, Senator Also Brooks was scheduled to join us. Unfortunately, she can't. She just actually was at the hearing questioning RFK, which kind of ran long. But we are very excited to have up next another leader on the Democratic side on health care from Wisconsin, Senator Tammy Baldwin. Well, thanks for joining us, Senator.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot going on the Hill today, so maybe we'll just, as I just mentioned, maybe we'll start with where you just came from, the HELP Committee. with Secretary Kennedy. What was your takeaway from both your questions and just kind of his appearance in general? I mean, you asked him, for example, about, it's been well publicized, Milwaukee wasn't getting help from the CDC on lead poisoning, and you asked him about that.
Absolutely. You know, let me explain the situation in Milwaukee. We have 6 schools that have lead in the environment in these schools. We've had several students test positive for lead poisoning. They've had to move 1,800 students in these 6 schools to other locations. And there is a branch of the CDC that specializes in child lead poisoning and hazard mitigation. Every person in that branch has been fired. There's no one answering the phone when the Milwaukee Public Schools call. And so I had a chance to ask Secretary Kennedy about that, and I don't think he even knew. And when I asked whether the plan is to eliminate this branch of the CDC, he said, no, emphatically. Well, how can you have this continue when all the experts have been fired? So it was really horrifying. I started by a sort of graphic demonstration of, you know, the lack of information and transparency in this administration with him. We have a 6-page document that is their skinny budget. And then when they were charged with giving us their operating plan for the balance of fiscal year 25, after we passed the CR, that was one of their responsibilities, 530 programs simply have an asterisk where a dollar figure should be. We are not getting information, and I think that's deeply disturbing in a larger administration that is acting in ways that don't comply with the law and don't respect the Constitution, that Congress makes laws and passes budgets and appropriation bills, and they are to administer and implement them.
Yeah, let me ask about another, Kennedy initiative. There's been a lot of tension on the NIH,
Yes.
grants not going out, obviously layoffs affecting the NIH and other HHS agencies. You also have an important role in the Appropriations Committee. What can you do to push back? Is there something that Congress can do to make sure that the law as it's passed, they're actually giving out these NIH grants, or how do you view
Well, it's really important that we raise awareness about this, highlight this, and lift the stories of people who are harmed by these actions. We had a funding freeze, then we had the refusal by this administration to convene the panels that make the grant awards. By this time, the administration should have billions of dollars of appropriated money to the research projects, that they are delayed. And what does that mean? It means delays in cures and effective treatments for things like cancer and Alzheimer's and diabetes. Because I'm in the minority party now, held a spotlight hearing, if you will. I can't convene hearings of committees in the minority, but I can certainly bring witnesses to Capitol Hill. And we heard from a range of folks who gave very personal testimony of how the freeze in funding or termination of certain grants is impacting them, including a 10-year-old named Dewey, whose father has ALS. And all Dewey wants is for his father to be able to see him graduate from high school. And his father is beating the odds because of NIH-funded research. And if that comes to a halt, it means lives.
Yeah. Well, to shift to, there's so much going on today on the House side. Energy and Commerce just actually an hour or so ago advanced out their Medicaid overhaul cuts. you know, it needs to pass the full House, obviously, and there's a way to go, but it's going to come to the Senate. What do you think is going to, I mean, have you heard anything from your Senate Republican colleagues? It seems like some of them, at least, have some concerns with these Medicaid changes. How do you kind of view that when it gets to the Senate?
Well, I haven't seen any changes they might have made in Energy and Commerce today, but the plan that I saw earlier this week is estimated to result in about just shy of 14 million Americans losing their insurance and their health care coverage. Some of that is through the Medicaid cuts, some of that is through the allowance of the tax credit that helps people afford their Affordable Care Act marketplace insurance coming to an end. And the idea that we would move forward with a bill that results in 14 million Americans losing their health coverage is, you know, in some ways unfathomable. But I want to remind us that in the first Trump administration, we were able to defeat one of the worst provisions, which was the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, because people told their stories. People shared and organized. And I've been hosting Medicaid roundtables around the state of Wisconsin. I think I'm at close to a dozen in different parts of the state. People coming in and talking about what cut would mean to them and their families. We know that there are millions of seniors in nursing homes who wouldn't have a safe roof over their head but for Medicaid. I've heard from a lot of parents with children with disabilities, sometimes adult children with disabilities, who could not keep their children safe without the Medicaid coverage for health care and other wraparound services that are necessary. A third of all children have insurance through Medicaid. And so we, by organizing and elevating those powerful stories, have a fighting chance to defeat the worst of these provisions.
Yeah, you also mentioned the enhanced tax credits in
Yes.
the ACA are not part of this bill.
That's right.
It's a couple of Republicans, at least, have expressed some openness, at least, to continuing them. You know, outside of reconciliation, maybe once that's over, do you think there is a chance for a bipartisan bill to extend those sometime this year before they end?
Well, first, let's say this is the opportunity. There's a lot of tax provisions in the budget reconciliation. This ought to be one of them. The Republicans are being criticized right now for slashing programs that help the most vulnerable in our society in order to find room in their budget for tax breaks for big corporations and the wealthiest. And this would be an opportunity to provide a tax provision, a tax credit that helps those who are middle class and working people be able to afford health care coverage. This is the time to do it. They should not be kicking it down the road. And that, combined with several other tax provisions like the expanding the child tax credit, earned income tax credit, those would be the type of measures that are really helping the working class, the middle class in the United States, that should be our priority.
Mm-hmm. To shift back to Secretary Kennedy for a second,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously when he was being confirmed, there was a lot of attention in the Help Committee, which you're on, Chairman Cassidy, pressing him on his vaccine views. He's taken some, even today, he was sort of pressed on the measles vaccine and seemed to kind of give different answers at different times, maybe.
It was my member of Congress who was pressing him.
That's
Mark
right,
Pocanis
Congressman Pocanis.
is my member of Congress, and I saw that interaction. He would not answer a question about whether today he would vaccinate his own children for measles. And then went on to say words to the effect of, people shouldn't take medical advice from me. he heads a department, that is the biggest public health agency in the world.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it, I don't know, what you expected on vaccine? How have you viewed his vaccine? I mean, there are some steps I guess he could still take that he has not in taking them back. But how do you evaluate what he's done so far?
He has spent a career creating conspiracy theories around this. He referred clients to law firms and got kickbacks for doing that. I mean, this is part of his life's work, if you will. And I think it's deeply troubling that the Senate confirmed a vaccine skeptic and conspiracy theorist to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Well, to shift, I mean, we've been talking a lot about sort of Republican initiatives and defense, Democratic defense against those. To shift sort of more proactively, I mean, you're in the minority now, but if Democrats do win back the majority, whenever that is, what do you kind of view as the next big Democratic initiatives? I mean, the 2020 campaign in the primary, we saw, public option versus Medicare for all. There was this long, drawn-out debate. I mean, do you think we're going to go back to that, or is the message shifting to something more focused on healthcare costs in a more direct way, or how do you kind of view the message?
Yeah, it's all about whose side we're on too. But I want to share my story. Your previous guest talked about his medical career. I want to tell you why I feel so passionately about healthcare reform. I was raised by my grandparents, and when I was 9, I had a very serious childhood illness, and it landed me in the hospital for 3 months. Now, first problem, my grandparents had health insurance through my grandfather's work, but it didn't cover grandchildren. I wasn't a legal dependent. Then, let's fix this, let's try to get her health insurance. I was then a child with a pre-existing health condition. And back then, as we recall, health insurers did not have to provide coverage to someone with a pre-existing condition. There were also annual caps and lifetime caps that didn't provide for people in need, like the coverage that they needed to prevent them from going into bankruptcy. I ran for office to try to help fix this, and I was very proud when I was in the House on the Energy and Commerce Committee to help write the Affordable Care Act and to make sure that they couldn't say no to people with pre-existing health conditions, that they couldn't have annual caps and lifetime caps. And by the way, I wrote the provision that allows young people to stay on their parents' health insurance until they turn 26. I know that many have coverage and access to health care because of the work we did. But that work was not finished. I was a big supporter of the public option, as you said. People cannot afford their care still. The cost of prescription drugs is out of reach for many. And the cost reforms need to be advanced. But I also think we need to look big picture. I would like to see not only Medicare be available to more, maybe at a younger age, et cetera, but I would like to see it cover dental care and vision and hearing. And I know that many of my colleagues very much agree with an initiative like that. So I think reining in costs, looking at access in both urban areas and rural areas, and I represent both in a state like Wisconsin, and thinking broadly about expanding Medicare coverage is the direction to go in.
And branching off of that, I mean, you obviously, from a political side of things, I mean, you represent a big swing state, Wisconsin. When you travel around back home, what's the message on healthcare that really breaks through to people, or how would you advise other Democrats to talk about healthcare in a way that gets through to maybe some swing voters?
So I think too often we start with the numbers, and I did that. I fell into that trap. A third of all children, all the seniors, et cetera. lifting the stories. I brought, every member of Congress can bring one guest to the State of the Union address. I brought Renee from Milwaukee, who has stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. Her cancer was diagnosed by a program in Wisconsin we call the Well Woman Program, but it's basically a congressionally authorized program that allows screening for breast and cervical cancer for folks who don't have insurance coverage or low income. And so she was screened, and that's how she found out. But her treatment comes through Medicaid. And she told me, and we did a lot of TV interviews together, so she got a much broader audience. She said, look, if they cut my Medicaid, my husband and I have really horrible choices. We can spend down our entire retirement savings on my cancer treatment, or I can forego it and probably not live as long. And that is a choice no American should have to face. And so we uplift these stories, and people learn, and people are organizing around this right now. I also think about, in the Medicaid battle, all the people whose jobs depend on their being Medicaid. You know, the people who work at the nursing homes, where the majority of seniors in those nursing homes have Medicaid paying for that, that stay. I think of the nonprofits that are in Wisconsin that are providing services to adults with severe disabilities. And there's a whole set of ripple effects. Critical access hospitals could close, nursing homes could close. So telling those stories is the most powerful thing I think we could
stories
do.
can really break through to people, I guess. Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have. Thanks so much for...
It sped by.
So much, healthcare is always fun to talk about, so it goes by fast.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcoming back, Nicholas Johnston.
We are on the home stretch this afternoon. Thanks for sticking with us. A reminder that when we wrap up downstairs, we have a networking reception with more food and drink. I think that is upstairs even from here, so be sure to stick around from that. And now I'm very excited to do a big thanks and welcome to our final partner of the day, United Health Group. And I welcome for the View from the Top conversation, Executive Vice President and Chief Physician for Value-Based Care and Innovation, Dr. Wyatt Decker. Dr. Decker. Welcome to the Axios stage. Good to see you.
Great to be here.
Before we dive in, a little bit of news at United Health Group this week. You've got a new CEO. I wonder if you have any thoughts to share.
That's right. So many of you are aware we have a transition this week in our CEOs. Andrew Whitty has served for over 5 years as our CEO. I've had the pleasure of working extremely closely with him, and he's been an exceptional leader for the organization. But changes happen. Steve Hemsley, who many of you will recognize as the previous CEO and now board chair of the organization, is taking the reins. So we'll transition to a very seasoned healthcare leader, Steve Hemsley.
So let's dig in a little bit to your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what are you doing here?
I'm an emergency medicine physician. Spent 22 years at the Mayo Clinic. It's where I was trained. It's where I cut my teeth as a resident physician, and it's where I began to build a passion for how do we make healthcare better for those that we serve. Those of you who are familiar with the organization, for the half of 1% of the United States who crosses the threshold into the Mayo Clinic each year, it's an amazing experience. It's coordinated care. It's the needs of the patient come first, and fantastic results are obtained for the patients that the Mayo Clinic serves. But I began to ask myself as a leader, as a CEO for their operations in the Southwest, I said, how do we democratize the kind of care that a place like the Mayo Clinic offers? that became my passion.
So like, let's dig into that. Like, it's a frontline like healthcare provider. Like, this is in theory you're working at practice. And so coming out of that, like, what did you learn about what works and what doesn't?
As a practicing emergency physician, you cannot help but rapidly conclude that the United States does not have a functioning healthcare system. We have a sick care system. We have a system that if someone in this room suddenly keels over, and I hope none of us do, you're actually going to get emergency response and care in an emergency department here in DC that's world class. I have a degree of confidence in that because I'm familiar with the medical services here. But where was that system in the years, let's say you had a heart attack or a stroke, but in the years that led up to that heart attack and stroke, where was that system? And that's really, as an emergency doctor, you are all familiar with two things. One you may not be familiar with. One I'm sure you are, which is we have a massive problem with overcrowding in our nation's emergency departments, right? It's not unique to one city or another. It's all over the place. The part you might not be as familiar with is emergency physicians are the #1 burnt out specialty in all of the medical professions, followed shortly by primary care. Because in emergency medicine, you see this deep dysfunction of our sick care system. And any given shift that I would work, particularly evenings, which are always crowded, you realize that maybe half or 2/3 of the individuals that we were taking care of, if we'd had a system that had worked for them, they wouldn't need to be there. They were individuals that couldn't get in to see a doctor, didn't know who to go see, couldn't fill a prescription. Their prescription ran out for their heart failure, their diabetes, let's say, and now their blood sugar was sky high and it was a crisis. But that could have all been prevented if they had that team around them.
Well, then you're the doctor. We're all the folks in Washington, D.C. who think we're in charge here. Like, tell us how to prevent it. Like, what are the lessons that you take from that?
Absolutely. So many of you are also familiar with a phrase that's attributed to a couple of big thinkers, Deming and others 20, 30, or 40 years ago. Every system's perfectly designed to create the results you observe. So we actually shouldn't be surprised that a transactional system that pays for doing things has a lot of transactions and a lot of doing things. We pay for drugs, we pay for procedures, we pay for tests, but we don't reward our providers financially when we never have, and this is starting to change. We don't reward them financially for keeping all of us healthy and well. Right. And so this is like a root cause. If you talk to most doctors, they also have a long list of grievances with the electronic health record is clunky and takes them away from face-to-face time. That's fair. Regulatory burden, the friction between insurers and payers, which I'm well aware of, and we're doing a lot at United Health Group to de-escalate and make that better. But those are actually symptoms of a core root problem, which is this fee-for-service system that pays for volume.
Well, then how do we, so it's interesting you're saying this, because it's like it came up like when I was on stage earlier today about burnout issues. It almost sounds like, how do you shift it from being procedure-focused to patient-focused? Well, what are the recommendations then to bring that focus back around patients?
Well, let's start, Nick, with what do most people wish they had? And just all of you do a quick thought experiment with me, if you will. Indulge me. But think about your last interaction with the healthcare system, your doctor or a nurse or nurse practitioner or a loved one's. And one, I can pretty much guarantee you that there were friction points in there you wish you didn't have to deal with. You might love your doctor, I hope you do, but you still had trouble getting the appointment, or you still had trouble, or you didn't know how much you were going to pay, right? So there's all these friction points, Nick, and when you begin to actually take that step back, you say, most people wish that the U.S. healthcare system had to focus on keeping them healthy and well. But also, and this is an important add, has your back if you get sick, right? And that's actually something that I would submit we're not great at, but we're good at. We have some of the world's best doctors, best medical centers here in the United States, and we should be really, really proud of that. Super well-trained nursing staff, et cetera, very compassionate. But we have this broken system that's fragmented and full of friction.
Right. I mean, this could go on for a long time, but I want to dig in a little bit since we're talking future of health. Like, I can't be up here and not talk about AI.
Yes.
So tell me how that kind of overlies all of that, and is that helping solve some of these issues that you pointed out?
Yeah. So I've spent a lot of time very deep in technology and healthcare. There are obvious cautions that everyone in this audience is aware of, like let's not turn the robots loose. You know, it came up earlier today.
As a human, I like human.
Yeah. But I also think there's an incredible opportunity to make healthcare better for patients, and that needs to be the key conversation. Earlier, there were some conversations that felt like, oh, let's just pay doctors more and let's roll back to the 1980s. I'm like, no, don't go back to the 1980s. Patients were not the center. Doctors and hospitals have been the center of U.S. healthcare system for decades. And as a doctor, I would say, let's put people in the center of the U.S. healthcare system, and let's focus on keeping them healthy and well. And now to your question, let's use smart AI to help make that happen. Easy examples, but let's let the literally thousands of wellness apps on your phone, let's actually have bake-offs, require them to be data-driven and validated, and use the ones that actually help create better healthcare outcomes, which is a very small list. 2, for doctors and nurses, let's actually address their burnout with administrative burden. We can, right now today, I've deployed voice recognition, ambient voice recognition in our clinics. They will take a family doctor's day and shorten it by 90 minutes a day. And it's the work they hate. It's the documenting, filling out
forms. And that's 90 minutes they spend talking to a...
And that technology's here today. There's literally now over a dozen of credible vendors that are providing this. And so at United Health Group, we're very bullish on technology, but we do not believe we're ready, or we would never support replacing a doctor with the technology. And on the payer side, which is a big part of what United Health Group does, we do not and will not ever use AI or other technologies to deny care. That has to be a physician-to-physician decision that gets adjudicated.
Got it. All right, before we get the hook here, I want to end on one fun thing. As a former ER doctor, I want to end on one fun ER thing.
Yeah.
Can you tell a funny story about the ER, or am I going to get in trouble for asking?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, as a doc, you see it all, especially an ER doc. I've removed things from places that I wouldn't dare talk about to this audience. But also tell you, you got to remember that sometimes you're the problem. And I remember I was in the middle of my training, went up to northern Minnesota. I was training at the Mayo Clinic, northern Minnesota, a rural healthcare rotation. And I took care of a patient, full physical, and I thought, boy, the patients up here smell pretty strong. And next patient, I felt like, third patient. And by the time I saw the third patient, I thought, not only the patients up in this community smell pretty strong, but they smell like dog poop. And I looked down at my shoe, and there it was. So as a doctor, remember, sometimes the problem is you.
Physician heal thyself, I think is the word there. That's a great story to end on. Dr. Decker, thanks for being here. Thanks United Health Group for making today possible. Stick around with a big finish with Aaron Broadwin.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Axios Pro Health Tech Reporter, Aaron Broadwin.
Hello, everyone. I am a health tech reporter with Axios. I have had the honorable ability for the past few of these summits to be the last session of the day, AKA the one thing standing between all of you and happy hour. So hopefully this will be a fun discussion. I'm really excited about it. I'm closing us out with a conversation about a topic we've covered very closely at Axios, women's health. So please join me in welcoming to the stage HER's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jessica Shepard.
Hello.
Hello.
I heard that we're in between happy hours. So
Yes.
It should be fun.
Yes, it should be fun. I was just joking that backstage, I hope someone is taking a shot every time someone uses the word AI, but we'll probably talk about it too. So I have a ton of questions for you about your role as the Chief Medical Officer of HERS, which is part of Hims and Hers, the telemedicine company. But before that, I want to avoid bearing the lead, so to speak, in journalism phrasing. You all just raised $1 billion.
Yeah.
What are you using that capital to do?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things when we think of expansion, but also what we're doing in order to make healthcare accessible. That really is the tenet of what our platform is providing accessible care that's consistent and reliable. And so when you think of a raise, you think of what else can we do that's going to make it more efficient, stronger, but also expanding as well.
Got it. Okay. So obviously you're the Chief Medical Officer, as I said, of HERS. That is a new role for the company, Hims and Hers. Hims also has a Chief Medical Officer overseeing all of it.
Right.
Tell me why you joined and what you work on.
Yeah, when you look at Hims and Hers, it has been pretty aligned as far as how they were incorporated. Hims was first and Hers was shortly thereafter. So when we look at the expansion, that is always the goal. When you're thinking of women's healthcare, there really needs to be kind of this way to reach women. And as you can tell, as an OBGYN, but also a woman, I think that that is imperative that we are really dialing into the need for women's healthcare, but also what is that relationship that we're going to foster? And that's why I came on, because I'm very passionate about not only, what happens in between a woman and her healthcare provider, but what goes behind her ideas of how she thinks of herself in health. And that's something that we really wanted to hit home, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, you were a doctor for 20 years before joining Hims. Why did you make the decision to go from traditional healthcare to, what is still sort of a startup, even a public company?
I think that, traditional healthcare has its strengths, and obviously that's where most of our healthcare here in the US is focused on, is again in this structure of traditional healthcare. But there are different ways in which you see healthcare being innovative. And the way to push that is to find different avenues and different ways to reach patients. The other thing is that when we think of health outcomes, just in general, when we look at being a country with one of the best, if not through research, but healthcare in general, in what we can do for patients, we still have a lot of work to do. And in that means, how are we going to do that? And I think that telehealth, you'll see through the pandemic, that really changed the structure of how people access healthcare. And we even saw that in the traditional model in how we had to very quickly pivot or not. I think that there were a lot of patients that were left behind in the way that they were able to get their healthcare, but also a lot of healthcare providers and also institutions that weren't able to pivot that well. So I think innovation is key for making sure that we're reaching everyone accessibly, and also for the resources that we have available. So I think that it's a beautiful way to have more variety for patients to get the care that they need through different avenues.
What areas of women's health is Hims and Hers seeing the most growth currently?
Yeah, that actually in the weight loss category. So the weight loss category has really kind of been one of our best features when we think of what women are trying to access. But as we grow, obviously we know that there's going to be a push into the mid-age of women's healthcare. As they go through that, we're seeing a lot more in perimenopause and menopause, which is rightedly so. I think that's where we miss a lot of women when we think of, comorbidities and how women are aging. Some of the diseases that they get later on in life is because they weren't tended to in that mid-health or that mid-health stage. So as we start to grow, we're going to see more that's going to be able to permeate that specific transition so that we can have better health outcomes for women. Because women typically live longer than men, but we live more years in poorer health. So there's a gap that needs to be taken care of, but most times when you look at the research and the data, that has to be pulled back to being more preventative in that time frame, usually between the ages of around 45 to 55.
So since dozens of companies are seizing on this perimenopause and menopause stage, what is Hims and Hers specifically doing or planning to offer?
Yeah, when we look at weight loss is actually one of those key features, because usually women will start to have some of their weight struggles or issues around the mid-age area, but also when we think of hormonal health, what that looks like for women, because again, that's something that biologically starts to change and no one has control over that. But if we're able to offer solutions for women to be able to, again, make that transition, not only for comfort, and how they're feeling, but again, looking at long-term outcomes for women's health, that's really where we're starting to see the needle, kind of change in the right direction.
Yeah, you've told me previously that you've seen a surge in awareness around women's health. I feel like we're seeing that as well. We've been writing about it a lot at Axios. What do you think is driving that surge in awareness right now?
You know, as a provider and a physician, I think that there were things that we were not paying attention to. But also, when you think of women, they are so busy taking care of everyone else that they often forget to take care of themselves. And so when you kind of put those two together, you see that there's going to be a gap. There's going to be a gap in actual healthcare. There's a gap in research when we think of equity and how we actually look at research that's devoted to new medications or just how do we prevent certain diseases. And I think that we really need to make sure that we're not missing that stage and being critical for women to be able to pay attention to themselves, get the health care that they need. But also, when we think of a telehealth platform, we know that one of those things is convenience and flexibility, and that is being able to offer women at the time of their need the health care that they want.
Yeah, you mentioned weight loss. What is next for Hims and Hers in the GLP-1 business? Are we going to see more branded partnerships like the one that you did with Novo?
I think that could be a possibility. I think this is just the start of what collaboration and partnership looks like. And I think that it actually, when I think of innovation, I think that that's the best way to do it, is kind of the beauty of the blends and how you can take something that you're very strong at and being able to incorporate or hold hands with someone else who has strengths in other areas. So with the GLP-1s, we do that really well. And one of the key features is, what is the continuity of when people start something? Is the consistency and the sustainability of what they're able to take. So for example, in the GLP-1 sector of our business, we see that there's only maybe 13% that will discontinue. When you look at a traditional healthcare setting, that again can be as much as 30 to 40%. So again, what makes those changes is being able to be accessible, but having that asynchronous kind of interaction and at the time of need. So if someone at 2 a.m., because that's the free time that they have to be able to interact with their provider, then that's available. And I even see that, when I was in the traditional healthcare setting, is after certain hours, it really is hard, even from our end, to provide the care that we want with someone when the building's closed, the office is closed, or the phone lines are shut off. So creating kind of a way to overcome those barriers is only going to make healthcare more accessible.
What's your view on compounded GLP-1s? I know you've been offering them.
Yeah.
Do you see a future in continuing to offer them?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of myths or misunderstanding when we think of compounding. And compounding really has value add when we think of the full context of how we are able to offer medications and drugs to the population. And for our particular facilities, we have them where they have their own FDA being able to be entered into cleared, and also that we have very good eyesight on what's going in and what's coming out, because it's not through a third party. And a lot of people do use third party, and we do not do that. The other thing is there are a lot of things that people are unaware of what that means with the scrutiny of how you make a product, how you're able to offer maybe certificate of analysis with each batch that goes out. So there's transparency. And transparency in any part of medicine, whether it's compounding or not, really has to be kind of the forefront part of what's being compounded or what's being manufactured, what's going out to patients, and what are those side effects that may come, and being able to say, this is what it is, and this is what we're offering, and we do that, I would say, outstanding.
If a patient were to ask for a branded GLP-1, would you ask them whether they wanted a compounded version first?
You mean through the platform? I think that is patient autonomy. Patients should be given, this is how healthcare should work, is we're giving you the education, the information for you to make an informed decision. That goes across the board. It goes whether you would like a surgery or not. It goes if you want to try a medication for the disease that you have.
Right.
And that's exactly how they enter the platform, and being able to take what they need, and they get to decide.
Yeah, I just mean specifically if somebody asks for a GLP-1, do you suggest a compounded version first?
No, I don't think that's necessarily how that conversation goes. I think there's many ways the conversation goes in, again, hearing where the patient's needs are, what the patient is able maybe to afford, where they are, and how they're going to access that medication.
Okay. You've said equity and accessibility are very important to you, part of the reason you joined. Obviously, Hims is a cash pay only business. You do not accept insurance. How do you square those two things?
I think you square those two things when you think of healthcare and cost. Right now, a lot of patients, even who are insured, do not have the ability to afford what their insurance offers. And so because of using compounding, that is one way to actually, and owning your own facility is a way to drive down the cost so the patient has access and has the ability to get the affordability to access to what they need. And so there is sometimes messaging in how patients understand what they are able to be afforded based on if they're insured or not. And many times when you look at the outcomes, what a patient would be willing to do in order to get a certain outcome, that really goes with the individual, where they are and where we're able to meet them. And many times, even if they're not able to afford a certain medication or a drug through insurance, then a patient has that ability to search elsewhere for a product, and that's what we're able to offer. And I think that patients, we underestimate them. We underestimate exactly what they're willing to do in order to get the outcome that they want. And a lot of times that is dictated to them in the traditional healthcare model because that's how it's been set up.
Yeah, you've been talking a lot about your owning pharmacies and being able to produce all these medications on your own.
Yeah.
Is some of the capital you just raised going to go towards building more pharmacies?
Well, because we have expansion. So for example, with HERS, as we're doing more women's health, that means expansion, and what that means, more facilities. So possibly some of that may go to that, but I think that there's never one thing that all the money goes to. So there has to be a lot of different things where that goes to, and that's definitely one of them.
Definitely. Obviously, there's been some criticism around telehealth not being able to provide the same quality of care as traditional medicine. I feel like you're the perfect person for this question since you've worked directly in traditional medicine and now you work here. What would you say to those criticisms?
Criticism for telehealth has been ever since we started doing telehealth, which has been years, and we haven't really seen the influx in traditional healthcare settings as much as we actually should. And during the pandemic is the perfect example of where patients really realize the importance of being able to access their healthcare provider at all times. And so now that we are able to do that at a time of need, when a patient is able to be able to access the healthcare they want and desire, I would say that the scrutiny comes with maybe not being able to see maybe someone in person. But when you think of healthcare in general, it has to go with what is the patient coming in with and where can we meet that need. And I think that should be the bottom line of how we think of healthcare in general. And there are a lot of barriers that come with when you think brick and mortar, in that you do get to see your provider, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to see your provider in person. And when we think of disease prevention, most of the times, most of the data does show that there usually is more disease progression because there's a lack of intervention or communication because you're not able to see your provider as much. So when we look at actual prevention, one of the key factors is being able to guide your patient through that process and maybe having to take a medication, how to take it, how often, answering the questions where they have concern or even hesitation or fear. And so if you're able to meet that patient and drive those things down and give them more empowerment and reassurance, that's where you'll actually see more success and add value to the patient's outcome.
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking from my own patient perspective is about care coordination and making sure that all my providers know what medications I'm taking, when I'm taking them, and that they don't conflict. How do you handle that?
That's the beauty of being able to say, I have this medication, I don't know. So that would be concern, that would be with hesitancy. And that's where the patient has to be empowered in themselves to ask the questions. And that's what we're able to foster because we have so much communication with them. So that comes with relationship. The more that you are comfortable with someone, the more that you feel safe as a patient in that environment, the more that you're willing to ask the hard questions. And that's where we can kind of get them to the better part of their care.
Thank you. Anything we should look for in terms of what's next for the company, specifically in women's health?
Yeah, I think in women's health, we are a big part of the population, and we're not going anywhere. So I do think that we have a demographic that is thriving. We have a demographic that really is starting to show their power in how they would like to show up in life. But again, going back to how we started, is that gap in women living longer but in poorer health for a longer time, is that women are aware of that and they're starting to use their voice. So as we expand in the HERS platform, I am so excited to be able to showcase that mid-age healthcare, and I know that we're going to even do more than that, even when you're looking at now how we can allow women to thrive even past that midlife stage. So make sure you stay tuned. We have so much coming in the HIMSS and HERS platform, and I'm so proud that we're able to be here.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear more about that. Yeah. Let's keep in touch. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was jumping the gun there. I was about to get up. Thank you all so much for being here. Don't worry, I am exiting the stage soon. I just wanted to deliver some thank yous to all of us. So obviously, thank you, Dr. Shepard, for joining us. This was, as a reminder, our very first Axios Future of Health Summit. Woo! Thank you. Also, before we go, I just wanted to say a big thank you today to the entire Axios events team. Everyone has been amazing. Backstage, you don't see what's going on back there, but they've been running back and forth and just being wonderful. I also want to thank our marketing and communications teams, client partnerships and editorial teams, and the teams at Creative Sound and Lightning, Planet Word, obviously, thank you for this lovely venue, and Amphora Catering for making our inaugural Future of Health Summit happen. If you enjoyed today and want to get in on the action for upcoming events at Axios, you can scan the QR codes that will be behind me, it says, on the screen momentarily. We will wait till those show up, or head to axios.com/events. And thanks again to everybody for joining us. Have a blasted happy hour or whatever else you have planned for this evening, and thank you again. Appreciate it.